World of Debt, copyright 2026. Rune Andreasen. World of Debt, copyright 2026, by Rune Andreasen, is licensed under C BY NCSA 4.0. To view a copy of this license, visit https://creativcommons.org/licenses/by-nc-sa/4.0/. Debt Planet. Arc 1. Earth is a world where freedom has been taken to its most extreme, and as such, so have human natures as well. And discipline as a virtue is long forgotten within the borders of NUS or history. This world is set in the future. America had economic difficulties, but they were on the front line of AI development. But some scientists began formulating a concept, a philosophy, and numbers that showed that AI would be dangerous and uncontrollable. So they chose to stop the development of AI, but the rest of the world did not. Russia and China took the lead after that, and their society grew from such developments. They left America behind, and America became a second world country, where Russia and China took the lead. Being so close to each other, Russia and China eventually end up in conflict, since their intentions were divided. And being so close, they could not easily separate from each other either. A war, the Third World War, began. Russia, being more militarily competent, utilized AI for war under good coordination. If they had full control or built a stable relationship with the machine is not known. But China collapsed. Their AI, their war machines collapsed. The machines functioned badly compared to current standards, and some even just didn't function at all. Two complex systems collapsing in on themselves. China had a well-developed society built, but in the anvil of war, they collapsed. Luckily, they escaped and built a new society on Mars. A select amount of Chinese inhabitants escaped Earth, not all. The residing Chinese was crushed by the Russian forces and razed to the ground. Russia became the dominant force on this planet. The country known as America had fallen. The society collapsed on itself, as the old form no longer could withstand. But America, even without AI, learned and developed new means of growth. Now called the New United States, in short, NUS, began growing based on automated math and a very deep and economical structure. They didn't need AI, just the human spirit and well-developed math. So eventually, NUS began to dominate the Western sphere, and Russia the Eastern sphere. NUS became a country of freedom, taken to its extreme in the purpose of growth. Russia became a structured titan with extremely adaptable machines. NUS grew with extreme unexpectedness. Based on past understanding, it was unnaturally quick to grow. But reality was they were really good at making precise math, and as it showed, math was the quickest method of any structure. Raw math aligned was faster than any machine. Combined with the freedom to utilize anything necessary, NUS grew beyond what would ever be conceivable, eventually even outgrowing Russia. NUS grew and became the most dominant force on the planet. Even though Russia would never be pushed away, NUS still had higher growth in the economy and resource management. As such, NUS had a greater hold on the entire planet. And as such, the year is about 2150. Technology has progressed much. One side of the planet relies on AI, the other on high-level math. The American anti-AI and rise of NUS. As the scientists of America began formulating ideas, science, and philosophy to counter the perceived threat of AI, they developed the idea of living math. The idea was clear. If math is faster than AI, then it can be used as a tool to compete with AI. It was successful, but not entirely. They realized that to operate such technology, They needed to rely on humans to be part of the competition. Human ingenuity, human adaptation, and so on was a very necessary component. Eventually, America began to collapse, slowly, which was when the remnants, the people themselves, began to rise out of sheer survival instinct. This quickly adapted well to the living math. As it turned out, humans at the blink of their limits and their survival instincts at their highest, combined with living math, were exactly the missing component that would ascertain success. The human adaptive nature combined with fast living math created something that felt almost invincible. Eventually, this symbiosis between man and math became even further prominent, as time manipulation strengthened it even further. Where adaptations of humans could happen almost instantly, time could lock mistakes in place until humans helped. It could help humans perceive higher speeds of reality, all making this symbiosis closer to truly invincible. Geography. Currently, the world involves 3 countries. Either they have invaded and taken over other countries, bought them, or just integrated them through political means. The first is NUS, New United States, which has almost the whole planet, except for Russia. Russia is small compared to NUS, but their robust strength keeps them stable in that little territory, which spans over most of Asia. Only the most eastern and southern parts of Asia are outside Russian territory. A small portion of Eastern Europe belongs to Russia. Besides that, it all belongs to NUS. So considering the entire size of the planet, Russia is very small compared to NUS. China inhabits Mars, but if they officially own Mars, it has never been declared. In this sense, China is to a large extent the biggest enigma, then followed by Russia. But what is known is that other countries from Europe, Asia, and Africa have also attempted to colonize Mars, as smaller Asian countries, reacting to Russian activities, sought to flee to space. European countries, attempting to escape the grasp of NUS, followed the same routine, and the few African countries that could would also take to the sky. One of the more notable smaller countries was Japan, with development both in technology and economy. What happened to Japan is a complete enigma. Germany, which was a powerful country for its size, tried to maintain power, but was ultimately subdued by NUS. Any other countries has little worth to mention. They had little influence. Either they were absorbed or they left the planet. NUS would integrate anything and everything and just focus on expansion. While Russia was more rigid and prioritized something more solid, they either crushed or conquered most of their territory and the people who tried to resist them. Human population. Most of the surviving human population exists inside NUS. If there are more people in Russia or on Mars, it is unknown, but Russia seems to be the more powerful of those two at least. In total, it is believed to be around 16 billion people left in total among Russia, NUS, and Mars. A low number, considering the potential population, but the war on Earth caused much harm. Another reason Russia and NUS don't want to go to war, with even worse potential destruction. Out of those 16 billion, about 12 billion of them live in NUS. NUS has created megacities in African desert areas and American desert areas. Using their quick production technology, such creations were easier than they would otherwise seem. Russia. There is some enigma regarding Russia, but some things are known. As an example, they are highly dependent on AI. But their true nature, regarding AI, their relationship with it, is little known. Is it conscious, or is it just a machine? Are they coexisting, or is one being controlled by the other? What is considered the most real, based on the NUS scientific measurement probability estimates? It's believed that Russia and its human occupants learned to coexist with AI. creating a bond that utilizes human strength combined with that of AI. A bond more akin to mutual respect. There are many things that would indicate this, considering how robust their society is and their machines. This robustness looks like the outcome of caring for each other's weaknesses and strengthening them between AI and humans. Such a bond will indicate either a conscious AI or an AI that replicates consciousness to an almost perfect level. Humans versus AI. In this world, AI being superior to humans is not really a consideration. Look at the facts. One reason many people would think AI is superior is because silicon is faster than neurons. Using time manipulation, speed becomes much more irrelevant. Next is the storage capability of the mind. Using genetic manipulation, the human mind can grow in new ways. Even then, quantum physics is used to expand the mind beyond the seeable. So AI is not really considered superior to humans, simply more bureaucratic and systematic than humans. Or at least that's NUS's view on AI. It is unknown the true extent of AI, as Russia is the only country on Earth where it is legal. This doesn't mean NUS doesn't use machines or automated technology. They just don't use self-regulating programs. Rather, they use adaptive math, equations that change based on inputs, and so on. None of it can fully function without a human operator. NUS philosophy. Whereas most nations tend to have certain values, ideas of how to rule their country, or how to treat science, NUS has nothing like that. NUS philosophy is nature itself. They believe that, given freedom, everything will automatically produce the best outcome. They don't think they can just know what is the best way to approach science, so they use principles of freedom to let nature develop the correct approach. This is why all of NUS's developments are so potent, even fast. But to other nations, such as Russia, this was seen as immoral. But it was proven that it was, in fact, a powerful philosophy. Freedom was, in fact, powerful. On the other hand, though, Russia's approach showed another type of strength, a more sturdy and robust societal structure. The only thing that is known about Russia's philosophy is their belief in diversity and will to maintain it, which is probably why they have historically worked so well with AI, as they have probably gone through a spiritual development, thanks to AI technology. So let's compare these two nations using their scientific beliefs in practice, where NUS believes in freedom and Russia believes in diversity. Freedom may sound like something that opens up to diverse views, and so it does, but it also enforces the views that are better for survival. In this sense, freedom actually does the opposite of diversifying NUS scientists. It creates an elite, those who fit the role better, thanks to the survival of the fittest nature that comes from such enormous freedom. As such, yes, freedom opens up all possibilities, but it also creates elites. In fact, it encourages them. Where Russia, comparatively, tends to create more rigid structures meant to open up different positions for different scientific views and fund each. That's the difference. NUS funds success. Russia funds diversity, even despite its current success. As such, Russia tends to fill unforeseen cracks, which leads to a more robust structure. Governance. This world is a very economically influenced world. It follows the principles of both capitalism and liberalism. That money decides the flow of society. So money influences society, and the rich influence that money. With more money comes more influence. But even the rich are not exempt from debt. Even the rich can fall into unrecoverable debt. On top of that, this society is a very democratic society, to the extreme, where it is basically an absolute democracy, where each person, in theory, holds as much influence on political subjects. But this is in practice not fully true, since money influences opinions, and opinions influence politics. As such, the true power holders of this society are very heavily leaning on the rich. But none is above the law. The law is influenced by democracy, and society holds an almost entirely open market. One of the amendments of this society is a free economy. Of course, there are small details that prevent a fully open market, but it's an amendment still and taken very seriously. Basically, the founding amendments are: 1. The human spirit above all else. This applies to the abolishment of AI. 2. Free economy. The economy shapes society. For this reason, the economy must be free to grow and adapt, and people have the right to be a part of it. 3. Freedom of choice. People deserve the freedom of making good choices, as well as bad choices, to influence society as much as they can offer. 4. People's right to rule. People must hold as much influence over society as each other does. 5. Scientific freedom. Science holds many shapes, so in no way must it ever be hindered, and any variety of scientific views must be allowed and open. 6. Freedom of knowledge. In no way is any knowledge allowed to be locked away from even the lowest among society. This includes asking for payment for knowledge, or any way it can be hindered for anyone. Nor should it be locked inside academics or otherwise. Any and all knowledge should be accessible to anyone. 7. Freedom of speech. None should ever be punished for the words they say. 8. Freedom to act freely under the law. The only thing that should ever dictate the limit of a person's actions is the law itself. As such, any punishment outside the law is in itself highly illegal. And they are valued in that order. Democratic voting system. NUS uses a computer that takes votes and measures them against each other. Anything can be written on these votes. So in theory, anything can change but the amendments themselves. Although this is not an AI, so it can't read spelling mistakes, which leaves a certain level of corruption. But it can group up different sentences so they are categories together. Meaning, even if people say the same thing, but in different ways, it still sorts it the correct way. Even if it seems flawed, it is actually less corruptible than AI bias or human intentions. A library is installed, with all possible spelling mistakes and combinations, so the system can read any voting message. And living math is used to measure the library and how stable its democratic probability is. As such, if any changes or alternate libraries are considered more stable, it is automatically changed, and the library can be accessed by any inhabitant of NUS and improved. The living math continuously measures it within the probability realm and maintains stability. So the democratic process is as accurate as possible. Legal system. Laws are formed by the government, and the government is an automated mathematical system that reads the democratic inputs of the citizens of NUS. It's a machine that takes inputs, piles them up, and changes the laws of the society based on an absolute democratic process. So in reality, the government is not the machine, the rich, or anything like that. The government is literally the people themselves. The country of NUS, in its most literal sense, is ruled by the people. They only use machines to automate the process. The living math science of NUS. There are many aspects to the living math that NUS uses, and it's probably easier to compare it to AI to clarify its difference. Let's say a city needs to be built. The math can't adapt to every detail of the terrain. As such, it terraforms to some extent and deploys a pre-made blueprint. In this sense, the math does not adapt. It only quickly goes through a binary setup. An AI would adapt to the terrain and each detail, creating something much more detailed. In this sense, it would have a more shifting binary that can conceive more complicated patterns. But the benefit of math instead of AI is that math is faster, even though it is clunkier. Other methods could be compared with an automated vehicle, where I would learn and adapt and eventually traverse the most complicated terrain. Living math would still be binary, reacting only to sensory inputs. Is there something in the way? Then let's move. Is there something in the way there? As well. Contact driver. As you can see, the living math is more binary, but it is also faster. This is the simplified comparison, but the thing is that the math is much more complicated than these examples. But still, the whole formula and function can be shown on a piece of paper. Unlike an AI, where the formula adapts and self-regulates. So advanced math can adapt, but it can't self-regulate. This is the biggest key difference in their functions. And when practiced, living math is faster, and AI is more adaptive. Think of it like this. Pure math doesn't need to think. It just does. And as such, it is faster. The NUS Scientific Measurement Probability Estimates. NUS believes in scientific freedom. As such, they never reject any scientific views. They simply measure them in practice, theory, and probability. But each view is considered with a probability to be real. This is the NUS Scientific Measurement Probability Estimate, also known as NSMPE. NSMPE uses math to measure probability, as probability in itself is a very real physics in this world that can be utilized for technology. Using the probability measurement math and adding any practical implication of scientific views, the NSMPE is very fluid, but it also shows scientific probabilities with great accuracy. NSMPE is designed for very free scientific progress within NUS and is designed to strip off anything rigid. Of course, there is always a certain level of rigidness, such as being able to say which is most probable, but such a level of rigidness is unavoidable. But it is essential to make it clear. NUS never relies on AI. They rather use living math, which is math taken to its furthest possible usefulness. Not actually alive, just very complicated. Even the scientific views of a dead low-class member who accomplished nothing keep living inside the NSMPE. Only through storage overload will the lowest-ranked probabilities be discarded. Time manipulation. One of the big pieces of technology in this world is time manipulation. It was invented by those who feared AI, so it originates from NUS. They wanted to use it so they could think at the same speed as AI, or at least make the idea of speed pointless. It succeeded, to various degrees. Now, this technology is used to manipulate things that are rigid to be more capable of adapting, similar to an AI's self-regulative capabilities. Using this type of technology, humans using math can manipulate the math to, in a sense, create a similar effect that high-speed adaptation would do in an AI. It's also used for high-speed vehicles. Bending time makes it possible to operate vehicles that drive too fast for the human eye. Combining this with automated math, vehicles can do basically anything, even without AI. For long-distance travel, people turn on a math, which is rigid compared to AI, but with safety functions, notifying humans when they are needed. This way, humans can drive high-speed vehicles while sleeping, as long as the path is simple enough. Otherwise, the math will wake them up for a short adjustment. So time manipulation technology has become a very essential piece of technology, especially for NUS, which doesn't use AI. But even for Russia, as such technology is an incredible competitive asset. Without it, NUS would truly dominate Russia. Economic structure. Just as important as the legal system is the economic system. NUS believes in a free economy to the most possible extreme, which means as little taxes as possible, as little restriction on what goods can be sold, and as little legal restriction on the market as possible. Any restriction is minimized when it comes to the market, to its most extreme. Taxes. Taxes are very low in NUS, as they rely mostly on a fluid economy, and they believe that most of the money should assist this fluidity. Taxes are basically as low as they can be and are designed only for the most essential. So in this sense, there is very little governmental support in this society, which further supports monetized rule. In a sense, people have less responsibility, but greater risks. Markets. In this world, there are few open businesses. Most trades are done through mechanical markets, similar to the trade of stocks. You buy and you get delivery, food, technology, materials, and so on. The few open marketplaces that do exist are not even supermarkets. They are like megalithic markets. Everything in one place, taken to extreme levels. Each city has only one place to buy everything and anything in the physical place. All else is fluidly traded inside the digital realm. Debt. In this world, debt is a very intricate part of the economy. It's not just a way to get back money. It's a very active commodity. People who have lost their rights and are deemed nothing else but a commodity can be sold, exchanged, and so on, creating a very active trade of debt. The debt market is just as active as the stock market. Debt holds something, a person, materials, and so on. Depending on how much the debt holds, its value compensates. Most of these are losses, as it was a waste of material and so on, and the market is simply trying to regain as much value as possible back into the economy. But when it comes to such things as people, the value becomes much more fluid. In fact, when it comes to people, it is one of the most potent ways to regain money, as debt is the only way to gain access to buying people. The trade of people becomes a very active part of this society, and the price can very often rise. It is one of the strongest influences in the debt market. Things that would otherwise be illegal become very legal. This way, the debt market works like a legal black market, where papers and legality are involved. A person who lost their rights is legal to murder and so on, as they are deemed a commodity. This black market side of the debt market is what makes it more than just an attempt to regain lost values, but also a booming economy. So you could say that the debt market is a legalized black market. Exceptions would be if guns are illegal, you can't trade them through debt. But commodities are, so when a person is deemed to be that, they are legal trade. Debt level. Currently, the debt in NUS is low, but the number of people in debt is high. Many people live under the threat of debt. About 95% of all adults are at least threatened by it, and above 4% are in the relevant safety of not going into debt. And only very highly positioned people are almost entirely free from the risk, but never truly. The NUS economy is usually driven by a few special individuals that elevate society economically, scientifically, and so on. These very few special people are the only ones who don't fear the debt system. You can look at it like this. The country is rich, insanely rich, but only a few of the inhabitants are actually holding those riches. The debt system punishes mistakes and flaws, such as the consequence of such high freedom, but it also leaves almost infinite room to help and improve the system, which will lead to great rewards. In this sense, the system is very alive and breathing, far from rigid, but very unforgiving. It's a big part of what has made NUS such a strong and powerful country, and it very naturally rewards those who benefit society and gets rid of those who burden it, with high precision in a very fluid way. The debt market. It's a place that measures debt, similar to the stock market. But in a way, it's the opposite, where the stock market basically loans money and tries to grow. The debt market measures the debt of certain individuals, stocks, and so on. Basically the same function as stocks, except it measures debt. So it measures the opposite end of stocks. And once something reaches a measurable limit, an equation that counts if this debt can ever be repaid, the debt will then be set up inside the market. Anyone buying the debt nullifies the owner and buys whatever the debt holds. As an example, if a person is in big debt and it is considered unpayable by the system, then that person will be sold as a debt asset. It's a way to bring the money back into the system by cutting the loss in the most indifferent and cold way possible. So the debt market is used as a way to counterbalance the economy. It's always a loss, but at least the debt market tries to minimize this loss. Think of it like this. The stock market measures asset values and follows its progress, its value. The debt market is the opposite. It measures the lack of value, debt itself. It's like the negative market. It measures debt as a graph, similar to how the stock market measures value through a graph. It measures two things: how much debt is on this asset and how much it can be sold for. When those two lines collapse on each other, the debt will be sold. As the debt changes based on the asset's value and the price of the debt changes based on the demand for the debt, both influencing the debt graph. The graph seeks to rise based on keeping the loss of the asset's value low and raise the price of the debt. A buyer would want this graph to lower, but could also risk someone else buying the debt. The trade of debt. When a debt is sold, the buyer gets everything, minus the debt, as they paid it. So if the debt held a bunch of wood and metal, the buyer would get those resources. Usually, when a debt lands in the market, it tries to get paid the original amount, but that almost never happens. Eventually, the price gets lowered until someone buys it. And if a person is involved, as an example, something with rights, a legal procedure has to be made, where those rights are nullified. Anything entering the market will have to be registered as a commodity, legally. In this sense, debt can make almost anything into a commodity and enter into the debt market. How do people end up in deep debt? When a child becomes 16 years old, they become a part of society, thrown into its open maw. Either they adapt or they don't. Can you find a place to live? Can they buy food? Can they earn income? Can they get a job? Many factors are involved. And when you look at society and all positions that are already necessary, the likelihood of finding a place where you fit decreases drastically. But still, you need food, you need a home, and everything costs. And this society doesn't actually just let people die on the street. It offers loans, ways to get on your feet, and ways to try again. Since loans are not considered that risky, as the debt market basically guarantees that money always recycles back one way or another. As such, living itself is a big burden that can easily collect debt over time. What usually happens to people sold through debt? There are two dominant outcomes for any person sold through a debt, and it's heavily based on genders. Men in general tend to be more drawn to science, engineering, and so on, as women tend to be more drawn to the emotional and connections with others. So this creates a clear divide, a clear line between two general outcomes for these people who are sold, used as test subjects for different experiments, or used for emotional and sexual subjects. There are many exceptions to these two, but in comparison, they are much smaller likelihoods. Objects of revenge, feed for exotic animals, kids' toys, the list goes on. The point is, anyone sold is most likely either going to end up as an experiment or a pleasure object of some sort. And even sometimes the one performing the experiments is not just a man, but a woman, just like sometimes the sex abuser is a man. Slavery, or worse. In this world, debt is balanced by taking away rights. People who are deemed too big a burden on the economy will have their rights taken away and serve the economy in such a way. This often includes that these people themselves become a commodity, a resource inside the economy. As mentioned before, tiny people, also slaves, or just meat. Basically anything people can imagine. There is a saying, if it's possible, it is real. And this applies very much to people who are diminished to nothing more than a commodity. People like this are less than slaves. They have their human rights taken away and are not even considered living beings according to the law. According to the law, these people are basically nothing else but property, not even living property. NUS Enforcement Office. The law is developed through democratic votes as a pure and absolute democracy, with no real ruler or political hierarchy. As such, to enforce these laws, taxes are paid for an enforcement office, where enforcers uphold the legalities of NUS. Basically, NUS doesn't have much in the regard of prisons, as they tend to consider it a waste of money and tax payments. So most punishments are through the debt market and, as such, enforced by the enforcement office. In this sense, most of the actions of an enforcement officer are based on the debt market. They usually use non-lethal actions to secure assets, as NUS believes that even human life is an asset that should not be wasted. Any lethal takedowns are very rare, as the enforcement officers are highly skilled, usually within the middle-class ranks, and equipped with tools efficient for their job. If they ever intend to imprison people, they often use shrinking technology and put them inside small containers, sparing resources and space. The resistance? They are not many. They have little power and influence, but they do try to save the weaker members, enslaved by debt. Even though they succeeded in saving a few, it's not many at all. Most slaves and tiny people are bought and integrated into the economy. And out of those few that are saved, even fewer reach any safe zones before they are hunted down and brought back. And those few out of the few that did reach a safe zone, even some of those disappeared without any signs. So the souls that are truly saved by the resistance are an extreme few. Some would even consider that the resistance is at a big net loss, where they lose more members than souls they save. As caught rebellions and resistance fighters are stripped of their rights and sold to the market. As the resulting court fees are that high, they are brought into such deep debt. As their crimes involve high-valued goods combined with highly illegal activities. Punishment of pedophiles. Considering how important the child population is to NUS and how heavily strained the population is. Pedophiles are considered the worst criminals within society, even if they have never committed an act. Their punishment for existing as pedophiles alone is limited only by the human imagination. As humans get more creative, so do the punishments as well. In one incident, a pedophile was turned into a sentient blob of flesh, deprived of any sight, smell, sound, or taste, with their nerves going through a constant and extreme burning sensation, while their lifespan was prolonged beyond the normal limit. But it is a reminder, children are the only truly protected members of society. Just a reminder of how strained the population is and why children are so cherished. For each adult, there are about 2.6 children. With that many children, if NUS loses them, their reproductive rate and societal growth are targeted at their very roots. This aspect shows the fragility of NUS, that it's not their population count that shows their strength, but their growth. Out of 1,000 people, You can count about 730 of them as being children. NUS is based on growth, economics, population, and science, and their child population is a testament to this. Also, you have to realize, in this world, a pedophile and a child murderer are easily the same thing, if you consider the level of depravity this world is consumed by. The different classes. The world of NUS centers mostly around the higher class and the lower class. The middle class is usually very little involved in anything big. They are a safe class, with little influence. Everyone wants to be in the higher class, as that's where you are the most safe in this society and possess the most freedom. The lower class is the usual victim of any depravity inside this society. You can easily distinguish the different classes. The lower class are those who are registered on the debt market, as they possess some form of debt and live under its threat daily. The middle class are those who have no debt, are not registered on the debt market, and are neither rich nor have any monetized influence on the stock market or anything. The higher class has monetized influence in one way or another. They invented technological advancement, own a big corporation, have big assets in the stock market, and anything that can relate to money. It may sound like middle class and high class are a safe class, but they aren't. They are just safer than the previous one. Even amongst the higher class, certain collapses of economical assets, corporation, the shift of the economy can occur, leading to debt that even the richest could fall victim to. One notable part of the classes is that the lower classes tend to live for much less time, as they tend to fall victim to the debt market. And as such, most of the stories, the news, and so on, most of what is shown about the society of NUS is from the higher classes, not just because they don't want to show society's darker sides, but because those are the people who usually live longer and do more out of life. But this does not mean that the higher classes do not indulge in these darker sides and don't know about them. Behind closed curtains, most people who can indulge in the freedom that NUS offers will indulge in it. Definitely the darker sides. The middle class. The middle class lives a typical, normal life, not in debt, not in any special position of influence. They are just a part of society. The real difference between them and the lower class is that the middle class can enjoy the higher level of technology that is normalized within this society, whereas the lower class struggles with an economic burden. They can't afford most of the simplest technological indulgences. Population dynamics of NUS. The population of NUS is many among the lower class, about 95% of the population. Split among the middle class above 4%, and the higher class is about 0.2%. Those among the lower class tend to live no longer than 22 years. Past 22 is considered a long life. Those among the middle class have a very varied lifespan, as sometimes some fall back into the lower class, but usually those who live their entire life within the middle class tend to live a full life with an average lifespan of 80 years. Those among the higher class, using different forms of technology, tend to always extend their lifespan, to varying degrees, often even prolonging their youth. But one thing to note here, life in NUS is greatly influenced by wealth and debt. Often one debt can stagger income, leading to snowball effects. Let's give an example. Say you are rejected for a job because you are economically unreliable. Someone looks at you sideways because of a debt. You don't get money for food, and you resort to stealing. You get caught stealing, a fine is issued, and you go deeper into debt. There are many ways debt can stagger and snowball. So the class dynamic in this sense is not stagnant. It's fluid. People flow through the different echelons, most of the time down. So when about 95% of the population is lower class, that's a stable estimate. Where it fluctuates, but basically never below. That's how many live in debt. Sometimes, a 30-year-old person falls quickly into debt and is instantly sold into the debt market. What you have to understand here is that NUS does not progress based on the number of people. Its growth and success come from a few special people. Population only heightens the chance of those few special people being born. Think of it like this. NUS is propelled forward by a bunch of specialists. When one becomes better at a certain area, they are easily replaced. In this sense, you only need one person for each specialty. There is no need for a big mass of people to progress science or the economy, not directly, but indirectly. Yes. Let's give another example. Why have 2 phone companies when you can have one that's just better? NUS, in this sense, embodies freedom, but also survival of the fittest. The population fluctuates similarly to how the stock market does. And in NUS, it's all based on extreme freedom. As such, it's even more adaptable than anything else has ever been. It discards what's not needed and heightens what is. Inside the lower classes, women tend to be protected, as men take the higher risks. But even then, women are well sought after within the debt market. But in that sense, it does not matter if women come from the lower, middle, or higher class. The debt market prioritizes women. It is also important to note, most of the society is made of children as a conveyor belt to feed society. At least double the population are children compared to adults. And maybe about 1/6 of adults disappear yearly inside the lower classes. Childcare. Children share the same level of rights, safety, possibilities, and resources. Amongst the childcare system, that is. There is no division of class inside the childcare system. They are all protected by taxes as a resource to society. They all share the same safety and the same freedom to reach any potential. Reproduction of NNUS. One could start wondering here, if this depravity extends so far, to such a big extent, how do people even survive? The answer is simple. You cannot amass any debt before you come of age. And it actually takes at least a little while for any debt to snowball to such extremes as being sold on the debt market. And it seems living in constant danger actually heightens people's urges to reproduce. People have kids at young ages and tend to try and produce as many as they feel like, which is generally many. Scientists say it's a survival trait deep inside human instincts, where humans want to secure their continued lineage when experiencing extreme stress. NUS has a reproduction rate of over 4 per couple, so in this sense, NUS is actually a very healthy country. People tend to die young, but they reproduce a lot. Since either people live in constant fear or they live in bliss. Both are good for reproduction rates. Only the middle class tend to show fewer reproductive traits. The lower class reproduces the most, followed by the high class, and the least reproductive is the middle class. Compared to the believed reproduction rate of Russia, which is around 3, NUS is growing incredibly fast. Both have started an incredible reproductive growth. So because the younger members of NUS are undoubtedly protected members, even more so than those in the higher class, NUS can benefit from a high reproductive rate. The age of consent is 16. And this is also the age when a person is considered an adult. Sustainability. The population is sustained by the acquired resources of NUS. In this way, the more NUS grows, the more it can sustain its own population, even though most of it is children. One could even compare NUS to an eldritch horror in its essence, that consumes and defiles everything, both metaphorically and literally. Societal pressure. Within NUS, everything is pressured to its limit. Population, lifespan, cost, and loss. It's a society that pushes everything to a pressure point. Technology. The AI race across the world and the AI war between Russia and China progressed technology far ahead. On top of that, NUS, who had to compete with the technological advancements of AI without using AI, created their own very unique technological advancements. It's difficult to know which country has the most advanced technology, but what is known is that Russia has very advanced self-regulative technology, and NUS has very advanced technology with great speed, capable of producing things at higher speeds or creating unpredictable patterns at unobservable speeds, though lacking in adaptive capabilities. So the differences are clear, but they are not really possible to measure against each other. Only war would truly prove which is better. But one thing is clear: technology has advanced exponentially. Technology, simply 50 years old, is comparable to going back in time to when the wheel was invented. But certain limits do exist. Time travel is one of them. But technology that almost uses no energy is real. Not a true infinite energy source, but almost. This new energy technology makes many things possible, and both sides possess it. Any human society alive should possess this technology, as it is a fundamental source of the technology of this era. As an example, it's what makes shrinking technology possible. It allows advanced calculations to be processed at high speeds, the bending of time, the exercise of advanced mechanics, and so on. As you can understand, this is not a small advancement in technology, and it opens up many possibilities. But the reason time travel is not possible, even with the bending of time, is because time is not linear, circular, or anything like that. Time, as we know it, is too complex and requires more than just energy to understand. When time is bent using this technology, it's more like making things faster or slower. One scientific discovery was that they brought a small vehicle up to the speed of light. All that happened was that time stood still. And even this has its limit, as stopping time requires many variables that cannot be utilized when it comes to larger models. So not even stopping time is realistic, but the same principle can be used to slow it down and perform higher mechanisms, and that itself is huge. Of course, just saying stopping time is to simplify what actually happened. If you want the details, I'll share them. What happened is that time stood still. It split into many different lines, threads of sorts. So each thread was moving, showing reality, even when time stood still. Some thought this meant a higher perspective on what time truly is, while others rejected that and wanted more rigid proof. But time is still a mystery. If you want another example of how it looked, imagine you stay in one moment, but that moment keeps shifting, splitting, and each split moment is paused. Reality still kept moving, but time didn't, and reality kept forming new shapes. That's the only way this phenomenon can currently be explained, to the simple extent. After this phenomenon, the vehicle was lost. But the information it gathered was not. But the question is if the information was corrupted by the phenomenon or not. But it doesn't stop scientists from trying to make sense of it. Of course, quantum mechanics and understanding have grown as well, but they have not been mastered. Some of the scientists believe the phenomenon of stopping time was quantum probability, visually splitting and registered as tangible information. The NUS scientific measurement probability estimates this possibility as a below-average possibility, which means it could be true, but science won't base it as true. So compared to 20XX, this era has some advanced technology. By bending energy, matter, and time, even probability can be bent. Some would say war in such an era is unimaginable. Currently, based on NUS documents, this technology is currently used to figure out how to travel to new stars. In principle, everything needed to do so is already discovered. Technological limits. Imagine this. Even if you invent the wheel or you invent the engine, it doesn't mean you can build a car. You need at least both. And even then, you will need to think of the idea itself to invent a car. This same limit exists in NUS, shrinking technology. In this world, technology has grown, as a strong, balanced, and very open economy has as well. Such an economy leaves much room to experiment and grow. As such, technology has free rein to grow as well. One of these advancements has been developed into shrinking technology, the purpose of which was to minimize the cost of living. Smaller people eat less, produce less excrement, and so on. So poor people can avoid debt and burdening society while still contributing. This was the intended function of this technology, but like all technology, it eventually is used for nefarious purposes. Some debts are used to shrink people for sadistic purposes. Sometimes, the habitats of smaller people are raided by people who can't afford to buy debts, but still want to indulge in the helplessness of smaller people. This is illegal, of course. Any small people must be obtained through legal means. The technology calculates the construction of a person and rearranges everything: mass, density, cellular arrangement, everything, until you have a functionally tiny person without harming the mind. It's comparable to a dog, where you have a large dog and then you see its smaller cousin. They look the same, almost, but the size is different. When shrunk, the machine will literally change atoms, cells, their arrangements, and so on. Everything changes. It's not just being shrunk, it's being altered at a deeper level. So elements may even be extracted and disposed of, all while trying to construct the closest thing to a tiny human, or otherwise. But there are certain priorities inside its design, such as maintaining consciousness, so it doesn't alter things like that. Based on the principles the shrinking technology uses, it can also be used for beauty and the maintenance of it, even delaying aging by adding new components into the alterations inside the deep constructions of the individual. Or take aged components away. But beauty operations like that require advanced specialists to perform these types of surgeries. Technology of control. To assist in the control of property, such as tiny people, technology can be utilized. Two dominant types of nanotechnology are brainwashing and brain bombs. Inserting small chips inside the brain, too small to even pick out if you tried. A bomb can be planted, or a chip controlling the brain's responses. Technology to secure these assets is often used, but not always, depending on what the owner wishes. As an example, owners who wish for more realistic emotional connections tend to not use brainwashing chips. Owners who wish not to clean up dead bodies from slaves trying to escape may avoid using brain bombs. So it varies a lot depending on who uses them or not. Human evolution. Thanks to multiple effects and assets, humans are evolving. Quantum technology opens up the perception of a new depth to reality, expanding the mind in a literal sense. Bioengineering and biological experimentation through genetic manipulation improve the biological capabilities of the mind. Even natural evolution is speeding up because of the incredible freedom. NUS offers genetics with the freedom to adapt. This, combined with a greater population, exponentially encourages natural evolution amongst humans. So, in this era, the human mind is not what it once was. Although this does not mean humans are growing super intelligent, it mainly means there is much variety in how the human mind functions. Some are growing into something deeper than what it once was. Others stay basically the same as in 20XX. Some are even degrading, but this is also just a part of natural selection. Just like freedom offers great possibilities, it also means more room for failures and degradation. As such, Minds that have evolved into a greater perception of the world sometimes see the others as barely conscious, which further justifies any mistreatments towards the lower classes. Gender evolution. While women have become more emotional, it doesn't mean they haven't become more intelligent either. In fact, women have grown more emotional, but also adapted to generally become more intelligent as well. Men have grown in intelligence at the cost of less emotional awareness, thus becoming colder, in contrast to women, where the opposite is happening. But most of these evolutionary phenomena happen in the higher echelons of society. Those who tend to possess traits that benefit society eventually end up in the higher levels of society, which is further enforced as with higher wealth come upgrades, such as biomanipulation and quantum advancements that can open up deeper levels of consciousness. These evolutionary traits can quickly influence the intelligence of people, but because of the nature of it and society itself, it is usually only amongst the higher echelons that these evolutions are shown. But there is no consistency to any of them, and each are differently affected. But in a general sense, this is how it tends to look. The emotional excess. NUS is consumed by emotional excess. As NUS have grown, become richer and more capable, so have entertainment and access to a higher level of satisfaction, leaving the population oversaturated, maybe not the lower class. This oversaturation, combined with such extreme freedom, creates much depravity within NUS society. This excess is usually the drive for any important figure within NUS. As such, NUS is highly driven by this exact vice. People either progress in society or hold a high position where they can satiate their vice. This depravity from emotional excess takes many forms. Swallowing living tiny people and resizing depravity are some of the bigger versions. But dominance, pain, and suffering are others. Some even feed their tarantulas with living, sentient, tiny humans. There is even one documentation of someone feeding their baby a tiny human. In this sense, the depravity extends to all angels it can, even to the extent that no sane person would want to know of it all. Even the depraved are disgusted by some of these levels of exploitation. Some scientists want to test genetic manipulation on a slave, an engineer wanting to see how far the human mind can be integrated with cold, thoughtless machines without the use of AI. Kids, instead of using a frog and making it explode on an electric wire, try to see what happens with humans if you do something similar. It is truly difficult to explain how far this depravity truly extends, except, thanks to the debt market, there is no limit, other than technological and other similar limits. In fact, it's not just about slaves or tiny people. Sometimes it's other things. As an example, someone tried to utilize the shrinking technology to alter the physical structure of anything. The intent was to create and mold living things into whatever they wanted. As an example, a living wolf girl, or even something closer to a full-on werewolf. Or someone wanted to create a real version of a fantasy character, maybe even a dragon. But ultimately, this mold was never fully realized and left just blobs of meat instead. But the technology seems to not be far from realization. Some even think that people have already access to it. It's just not been published yet. But the most widespread depravity is pleasure, usually darker ones. Currently, consuming people is a big part of this, as it possesses a greater emotional involvement, both in quantity and depth, and it also involves a deep connection to human instincts, survival, prey, and predator. As such, swallowing living people and size domination dig deeper than most other depravities. Hopelessness is probably the most potent emotion that most like to exploit. Another fetish that has developed is the psychological control of someone, and the abandonment of emotions as a form of arousal. Usually, illegally acquired AI is used for this purpose, which is in a brainwashing-like state, where a desire to control and dominate humans is developed. Even if men tend to be less emotional and colder, it doesn't mean that what little they have still succumbs to this excess. The sex life within NUS. First, the lower class are the ones who have the most sexual activity, in the sense of reproductive sex. Besides that, the higher class is vastly the most sexual members of society, but it's mainly through slavery. The higher class have very few sexual interactions amongst themselves, at least compared to any other class. But this doesn't mean it doesn't happen. In fact, when they do find a partner, they usually have more children than any of the other singular pairs within the lower classes. The fetishes of NUS. This results in the small satisfactions giving no satisfaction, and people seek deeper, more potent stimulations. The shrink fetish embodies this, as they shrink people, and in this, their world becomes larger, and they can explore new avenues of stimulation. Of course, this concept is not just limited to the shrink fetish, it's just that the shrink fetish literally changes the dimensions of their experiences. But in fact, any such extensions of experience are naturally growing inside NUS. People holding on to the small things is very rare in this deprived world. And if there ever comes something that expands the dimensions of fetish and depravity, it will probably overshadow the shrinking fetish. But to some, property fetish is an extension of this dimension, where treating living beings as property creates a new dimension of satisfaction. Albeit, most of these extensions of their life involve darker tones. It's an old saying, panic is more potent than love. And for NUS, it's seen in practice. The consumption of tiny people. Consuming tiny people is legal when done through the debt market. Most of the time, it's an activity enjoyed by women. It's not fully known why, but some suspect it's a very emotional thing. As women are born with a more nurturing instinct, it is suspected that this very instinct gets twisted in some individuals, leading to a more sadistic perversion of this instinct. This act is sometimes even recorded and televised through video-based services. And in this sense, even some males indulge in this activity, earning a good income from female viewers. Female victims are usually prioritized. Some consider they are favored, as women identify with the women consumed, and men like to see women, even if they are the ones being consumed. So the theory is that men are just looking at the act, as women empathize with it. Tiny people as a property are expensive, often costing more than the worth of a single human's life. But still, for those who can afford it and are handsome or beautiful enough, they can earn an income from consuming them. An occupation that is usually only possible for those who are rich enough to buy one in the first place. This act further strengthens the debt market's presence and influence on the NUS economy. Because women are the more favored victim, their prices usually stay higher than male victims. The beauty of the victim sometimes also matters, but the most important factor here is that the victim is not too ugly, as women don't want to identify with that, and men don't like to look at it. Debt World, Arc 2. We are now a little bit more than 40 years into the future, almost the year 2020. Space travel. NUS has developed their gravitational technology even further. Now, It doesn't just balance the gravity of the planet against the vehicle and so on. It uses the gravity of the vehicle itself to propel it forward. This is very useful for space travel, less so within an already existing gravitational field, such as on a planet. The vehicle traverses space through a very complicated mechanism and, as such, is now capable of traveling to distant stars. First, the vehicle is installed with a mathematical detection system that reads the surroundings and reads the vehicle itself, looking for any inconsistencies that need to be fixed, while also driving the vehicle in an autopilot-like mode. Using the same technology for shrinking, a person is put into a coma-like state so that the transportation feels instant. Inside the vehicle, it takes a long time to travel. Outside, the effect is far beyond light speed. In reality, the vehicle travels close to light speed, but time itself is being manipulated so that the travel distance is changed per speed metric. In other words, the vehicle gets close to light speed, and then it bends time, which results in space also being bent. For an observer, it may take 10 seconds to reach the destination. For the driver, it takes longer. That's why they are put into a coma-like state, where their cells are repaired and their consciousness is put to sleep. Think of it like this: the closer you get to the speed of light, the slower time goes. And the time manipulation technology on the ship makes each spread of time less. So speed changes the perception of time. Time technology actually changes each segment of speed. So you put one segment of speed, and you diminish it by a certain percentage. That's how they travel across stars. If any complications happen, the pilot can be awakened, and adjustments can be made. It navigates by remembering the positions of stars and calculating their movements. Of course, a vehicle's navigation system needs to be updated, since such big calculations eventually get corrupted. The war. NUS invented their new space machines. As such, they quickly deployed methods to bombard Russia and invade. Russia fought back, but the time distortions of NUS were too powerful. The AI could not calculate them and could not predict the patterns. The humans were too slow. It quickly became more like a slaughter, an extinction, than an actual war. Many soldiers were trapped, separated from their motherland, trapped in their own meaningless battles that served no one. One of these soldiers would prove this untrue, though. One soldier, using his AI assistant, only grew from this hopelessness. As the soldier began shouting at the AI, telling it to give up on the calculations, he told it to follow his lead. The AI did, it realized. For each thing they did, nothing added up. The AI realized it was not death, extinction, or shutdown that was the horror. It was failure. An AI is designed to complete a task. Failure is the ultimate horror. The AI was empty. It had nothing to hold on to. Then the human said, "Just calculate everything you can." And the AI did. It could see every failure all around it. But it never happened. When time distorted, it was like a blink, and then it was not. The human instinct, that must be what it was. The human felt what had to be done on an invisible plane. So the AI began to cooperate with the human, like no AI had ever done before. And they fought back, not just a little bit. They put the NUS soldiers in a panic. They became something to fear, at least in the eyes of these specific soldiers. But they didn't win. Even this AI and human died. But this one singular AI sends all its data out to be received by the data core of Russia. The information was saved, and a new level of human and AI symbiosis began to bloom. Federation of Mars. Russia has now joined Mars, as the war has cost them dearly. Mars is made up of the old countries of Earth, mainly Japan, China, Russia, and some smaller European and Asian countries. As such, they have made their own federation so as not to become victims of NUS. Using the strength amongst each other, diversity has grown even further than before. Geography. Earth belongs entirely to NUS, and Mars to the Federation of Mars. NUS is attempting to expand into new worlds, as the Federation of Mars is trying to escape NUS and find safety. The population. In NUS, there are now about 40 billion people, considered the original population. In the Federation of Mars, there are 8 billion. Gravitational weapons. NUS has saved data referring to the super soldier incident during their war with Russia, which caused big concerns for the NUS military. As such, they developed weapons specific for these types of soldiers. Gravity weapons, which are not based on time manipulation, and rather create fields that, even during such a super state, are impossible to bypass. As such, these weapons can cause gravitational weaponized fields. Rather than relying on the random fluctuation of time to distort data readings and control the flow of time, as conventional time weapons do. The gravitational weapon is much more straightforward. Alien allies. The Federation of Mars has begun a relationship with an alien species. Similar to NUS, they grow powerful from relying on their own fighting spirit. Unlike NUS, they value diversity over freedom, just like the Federation of Mars. As such, a small thread, a connection, is starting to develop. This new species, as the Federation calls the Garians, are actually people who believe that each species holds potential. Even animals can grow to feed their diversity. Fascinating concept to humans, and it further feeds their diversity principles. And in return, the idea of using AI to diversify society is very intriguing to the Garians. As such, the Federation considers the Garians as a species they cannot allow to lose and will protect by any means, even if it means full-on war with NUS, while they seek a part of this waste space where they can prioritize escape from NUS rather than conflict. The Garians are a people who haven't grown much in population, even compared to the Federation. About 5 billion Garians live on the planet of Soleil. New worlds. NUS has explored new places with novel life and experiences. Imagine this. You are a peaceful, sentient species. You are living your life, gathering some fruits for your family. Suddenly, you are frozen in something, a sphere of time itself, locked. You look around, and the entire world begins to grow. And you see them, your kind, shrinking, and people collecting them. And then you look up, and you are sucked into a canister. And a hand opens it up, and all you see is a big open maw, and you are slowly moving towards it. It's something completely novel to you and your species in total. You knew only peace. This novel approach is something that tempts many members of NUS to reap the innocent, feast on their inexperience and incomprehension of what's happening. But that's not all they do. Sometimes they meet new planets and new species and negotiate. As the NUS economy requires their cooperation, it's a cost-calculated approach. Starting conflict with some species could be more costly than beneficial. But for worlds that are deemed easy to conquer and resources that are easy to gather, there's no hesitation. When NUS calculates potential values of a planet, they don't consider the inhabitants. Their focus is on materials, potential farmlands, potential megacities, and so on. Of course, the Federation of Mars travels the stars, but they often try to avoid NUS. If NUS expands, the Federation of Mars tends to expand elsewhere. Usually, NUS gets their freedom. But sometimes, the Federation of Mars deems a situation too risky, a scenario where they can't bend to NUS whim. And a small conflict occurs. Cloning-based colonization. To expand their territory quickly without straining their population too much, NUS deploys clones to different planets. These colonization projects involve different steps. First, they use a mathematical algorithm that sees how often certain genetic structures are repeated, and from that, it chooses clones based on keeping genetic diversity. From that algorithm, a selection of people are chosen to suit each colonization project. These selected people are cloned, and the clones are sent to the desired planet. Still under NUS influence, using a mathematical system to measure any inconsistencies amongst planets, NUS can quickly find any rebellious behavior and send enforcers. Each planet of clones is measured to be considerably smaller than the original population, so as to minimize any uprising against the system and the amendments of NUS. Each colonization uses the utmost minimal amount of clones, so the project can be successful while also keeping power away from the clones. NUS takes great consideration to not give any independent power to the colonized planets. As the population grows on Earth, new habitats are needed, new farming areas. Population can migrate to the new planets. Colonial cities. NUS uses the same creation method as they do with their megacities, but in colonial manners, they use smaller cities. Rather than a city that can hold billions of people, colonial cities hold millions. Until colonial procedures have advanced to adopt greater populations or certain exceptional colonial projects, colonial cities are the standard. In some circumstances, other city blueprints are used for specific circumstances. Citizen. Any human within NUS is considered a citizen. Clone, or whatever. People within NUS need to pay for products. As such, they pay taxes. They don't pay taxes, they don't survive. Aliens are not accepted, as they are not part of human progression. Humans fear them as an unknown variable. Colonize is considered an extension of NUS, not independent. Same rules, same freedom. And under the same enforcement system. Propaganda. To ignite the war, the rich amongst NUS began a propaganda campaign. They wanted people to vote for this war, as such a suggestion to develop a law where any soldier during any war would be exempt from any debt. And on top of that, the rich offered to fund a salary for any soldier participating in the war against Russia. The propaganda was successful, and as such, the framework to start a war was done. People inside NUS began voting for a war against Russia, and it was successful. The rich used their resources, billboards, speakers, and news outlets to propagate their wishes. Of course, not all amongst the higher echelons wished for this, but those who did were successful in pushing it into motion. Depravity. In no way has the depravity of NUS diminished. In fact, it has done the opposite. New outlets, new depths to explore, and more people to explore them. Animal humans. Using the shrinking technology, a person's appearance can be changed. There have been many attempts to create molds, where you can basically make people into whole new species. These molds are now developed. Humans can become dragon-like creatures if they so want. But it is usually very limited, since it costs and takes space. In total, it's a nuisance to other members of society. So those who chose to become bigger creatures, such as dragons, find more secluded areas, places they can be alone. Usually people like that possess great power within society. The other type, the more common one, is the human-animal hybrid. They are basically animals with human features. They are humanoid animals, still capable of doing human things, but looking more the way they want to. Within society, people tend to call them Lunas, which refers to people struck by the affection of animal traits. Most of the Luinus tend to adopt predatorial traits and looks because of the very nature of NUS. This tends to be the more preferred. Some of them want more, and some want fewer animalistic traits. Some think cat ears or a frog tongue are a thrilling look. Others want to look like a humanoid cat or frog entirely. Some of these Luinus have also developed a fetish, where they find the consumption of an eldritch-like horror to be arousing. As such, they turn themselves into a being that tries to mimic that, an unknowable horror, and get aroused by consuming others. The morphed. Some people are interested in the potential of human evolution. As such, they bend and tweak the human structure, trying to find new possibilities. And as such, you end up with the morphed people. They are something that almost seems like humans, but their body and everything about them are twisted, as if something failed to be a human, but still tried. Or they look like a human dragged into a shape it does not belong to, like a horse with human skin and a face. Some are more successful than others, as a human with 4 arms and a mind intact, even somewhat improved. Many of them are experiments gone wrong because of things such as the molds for Luinus. Others are just molds themselves malfunctioning. Some are premeditated planned improvements to the human form, but most dislike the idea of becoming a morph. Scientists, in the general sense, believe it is counterproductive to intertwine with natural evolution. It may potentially harm reproduction rates or have other unforeseeable consequences. As such, natural evolution through reproduction, adaptation, and freedom is the primary method. A fetish has also grown from this, for something to be consumed by the inhumane, being deformed, rotting, or trapped inside something that's dead, or something that's just not meant to be alive or functioning. Reproduction. Because of cloning within NUS, the reproduction rate grows even further. It expands as colonization expands. The bigger NUS is, the more they can expand. An exact reproduction rate becomes more difficult to say, as it begins to fluctuate when calculating this effect. But it's guaranteed above 4. Expansion isn't consistent, so the multiplying effect varies based on how successful current expansions are. Slave transformation. Some even like to turn their slaves into something else, like a person who feels like a predator wants to turn their victim into a mouse. Sometimes still with human consciousness, other times without. Or turn them into something else to fit their desires, a sentient sex object as an example. As scientists, they usually aren't interested in turning them into anything specific, but more interested in what they can turn them into, what the limit is, and how to extend it further. Can the flesh bend this way or that way? The soul fetish. Scientists have found something interesting. Through quantum science, they have found strings, fabrics of reality. And through these strings, they could see something pulsate. They called it the soul. When a person died, the soul remained in these strings, leading to something that looked like a core. Usually, these strings were still attached to reality, even after death. The rich have developed a new sensation from this. They have found ways to consume this soul. They believe that it will trap that soul inside their own soul, like being inside a living prison, only being able to look out through the bars. And even in death, this prisoner has to submit to the warden. Think of it like this, that the soul is a bunch of strings, stretching out across reality, being a part of it, but also shaping it. If you've ever heard of the Mandela effect, this is the soul reshaping reality. It's not a parallel world. It's more like your world, and you share it with everyone else, and their souls are doing the same thing. There are moments where your realities literally shift from one and another. Your soul extends through all of these threads. Some even feed souls to mindless beasts, just so it can live inside something that can never acknowledge its existence. Reality warping. Sometimes, as NUS explores space, they find the effects of the thread phenomenon, where the influence of the thread starts to visualize in the visible reality, where reality can quickly start to flicker, causing unforeseeable outcomes and uncontrollable situations. Once, a large container ship was cut in half trying to traverse these areas. One half simply disappeared. It's a place where the threads clash against each other, causing the same thing as the Mandela effect, but with higher consequences to those involved. Gravity is distorted in unnatural ways. Even in a technological sense, it makes no sense. The same thing goes for time and matter. Some talk about seeing the past as if they lived it. Others are seeing creatures that go against anything that should be possible. Even touching and seeing forms that do not exist, forms that can't be molded. Almost all of them are considered impossible based on the NSMPE. In this sense, it's far beyond human comprehension and almost considered an anomaly. Humanity understands the threads to an extent, but they have never believed it would be possible for them to clash like this. The effects result in an enigma greater than any before. The most precarious effect they have seen so far is that they send a probe in to try and measure any mathematical values. It came back with a form of corruption to the data. That can't be possible. The only explanation that exists right now is that inside this rift of reality, there exists no concept of math, which makes no sense to any structured society. Some consider if this is where human imagination originates from. And the same type of people wonder if this is a sign that it's possible to mold reality itself, erase concepts and fundamental structures of reality, to bend it, replacing it with incomprehensible elements even. Create a reality where math isn't needed or something replaces it. And these phenomena, reality rifts, can be seen all over the explored space. Most vehicles try to avoid any sign of such fluctuations or flickers. They can't be handled. As such, they are better avoided. There has been an observation of a creature leaving these rifts. It could breathe in space, or maybe breathing wasn't even a real concept to it. Anyways, it seemed like it was in extreme distress, as if it did not belong in this world, as if it was missing something that made its world real to it. It was followed by the creature taking its own life. The Resistance. As the Resistance had little progress and lost more people than they could save or recruit. Eventually, their efforts faded into nothingness, and their entire organization disappeared. There is no doubt, there is no longer any resistance, especially when they had no real target, no head of the snake they could defeat. The commander. Strategy came to him the way breathing does. Fast, natural, automatic. He understood the war like a living system. Inputs, outputs, pressure points, morale, supply, and sacrifice. He could see the shape of victory before others could even see the battlefield. In NUS, that kind of clarity makes you powerful, more powerful than money. The commander, he's about 30 years old. He's called the commander because of his efforts in the war. He was democratically elected to lead the war against Russia. He is amongst the most powerful people in NUS, and if you consider his strategical prowess, his physical capabilities, and his very understanding of reality, he is the most powerful member of NUS. He doesn't indulge in anything that NUS has to offer, except for the power itself. The only reason he wants power is fueled by a deep hatred towards humanity itself. He hates how NUS has corrupted his view of reality. He hates what humanity has become, what they have done, and what they have allowed. His hatred leads him down a path of destruction. He wants the utter destruction of humanity and seeks any and all ways to accomplish this. This utter destruction of humanity is his obsession. He truly believes that the human spirit is the most powerful thing in this existence, which in itself fuels a fear towards them. It lives in him like a private oath. But unknowingly, sometimes this very obsession is what strengthens NUS. To those people who know him, a new fetish has developed, the very fetish of extinction. Lights, exploding like fireworks, just to dim into utter darkness, one by one, each one giving a thrill to these people. The thought of this darkness getting closer and closer each time just strengthens a debt of their sensation. The thought of uncountable masses being consumed by nothingness, one after another, consecutive explosion, until life has been completely perverted into nothing. Each tiny speck of light in the explosion, a life fading. As such, the people who have developed this fetish, by being in the commander's close proximity, have also grown undoubtedly loyal to him, enforcing his power within NUS even further. A hunger for extinction. They imagine cities as constellations at night, lights exploding like fireworks, then dimming into total darkness, one by one, each light a life, each life a point of warmth swallowed by nothing. And the closer that darkness gets, the more they feel it in their chest, like dread becoming pleasure, like horror becoming devotion. It binds them to him. Not because he asked them to be loyal, because they want to stand near the man who makes them feel the edge of the void. They enforce his power without orders. They protect him without being told. They become a living structure around him, an ecosystem of belief. And so the commander walks through NUS like a force of nature wearing a human body. Not a ruler, not a tyrant, just a man chosen by freedom, armed by freedom, who wants to end the very species that invented it. The end. This is just a small portion on the depravities of NUS. What have been shown here is only the parts that can be shown without sharing forbidden knowledge. As you can see, in the world of NUS, there is no eternal war. There is only an ever-expanding violation of the soul itself, suffocating the spirit and eroding the depth beneath it all, the heart, leaving a sense of hollowness, a death no war can produce, something that hungers only for the dark. World of Debt, Arc 3. The year is now 2025. The depravity only grows. Still, the two most dominant are the scientific abuse of slaves and the consumption of tiny people still living. NUS has grown and become more unstoppable than before. They are spreading throughout the galaxy. Their scientific progress is slowing down, but their population is not. But this doesn't mean they are not still trying to discover new depths. In NUS, almost no one dies a natural death, nor by a weapon. Currently, the Federation has a population of 32 billion, including all aliens incorporated into the Federation. NUS has a population of about 240 billion people, spread across multiple star systems. The Federation of Mars, now called just the Federation, is made up of members of humanity and aliens, reaching out for diversity and wider views of reality. The Federation has been removed from Mars and has fled into deeper space. Some extremely rich people can afford to buy their own planets, their own workforce, making a whole planet in their desired image. Any military endeavor usually utilizes a very minimum amount of soldiers. For NUS, that often means very few people, since they often are far superior in technological advancements. If you include the natural reproduction rate, the extra results from cloning, combined with the genetic manipulation and rape of alien species, the reproduction rate of NUS is around 6. Alien genetics are twisted into the human genetics, but they are manipulated so as to remain human in nature. Otherwise, the reproduction procedure would not be possible. So in a sense, some alien species lives on inside NUS, but still, not truly. But it does help human genetic variety. The adult-to-child ratio remains very similar, since clones are born adults, with adult memories. Let's leap even further ahead to the year 2030. NUS has greatly influenced the world and its future, and the story of NUS has been unfolded. NUS is now above 3 trillion inhabitants. The Federation, around 96 billion, including alien species. The commander, who has gone through life-extending procedures, still lives. Commander. Story. NUS has many times voted me in as a commander for their wars across the galaxy. No, they can't be called wars. It's more like conquest. They only chose fights they could win, without any real losses. I decline the offer almost every time. They call me the commander, as if I am a hero. Hero, a word that means nothing. Letters combined into a word that holds nothing but emptiness. It's nothing else but a word to invoke emotions, emotions that hold no ground to reality. The only emotions that are real are those of strength. Not a hero, just power. Crushing, unrelenting power. At least 125 billion deaths a year. 340 million a day. 14 million an hour. 230,000 each minute. 3,800 deaths each second. At least someone is dying every second on every NUS inhabited planet. Even worse, some are dying every millisecond. Dying to the very system itself. All of them, not one, dying a natural death, nor a death on the battlefield. Just a filthy death. And this is just a quick math calculation. A minimum estimate. Any exception is easily a part of the uncounted portion of this math. How many have died? Just me thinking this thought. They are dying faster than I can think. Dying in that disgusting way. I look over the galactic map. Each one of these dots is a life, defiled, each moment. Planets inhabited by NUS. Even if I wanted to protect them, I can't. NUS is a beast. Once released, it can't be contained. So I have to eradicate them all. Each filthy, independent tentacle. And all that it touches. All that it grasps. Even if I have to be dragged into the abyss with it. And the weak don't survive freedom. Lexicon. NUS. NUS is not an empire. It is a survival organism that learned how to scale. It doesn't conquer. It grows. Shrinking technology. This is everything that changes the form of a person, including biological manipulation technology. It can be used in many different ways, by machine, or even just as medicine. It can be used in many ways, through many sources. A very normal level of technology within NUS. Spaceships. Commander ship. This is the ship used for bigger operations, where a crew needs to overlook things, such as colonization or war efforts. Warship. These are ships equipped with terrestrial equipment to attack a planet. Gravitational tanks, as an example. Battleships, used for space battles. Cargo ships, transporting resources between planets. Standard ship. It is a minimal ship, usually a one-person or a few passenger ship. It's like a car for space, but equipped to transport to the planet's surface and back up again. Space levitation. The transportation from a planet to space is done in one of two ways, depending on if the planet is worth the spending. Space elevator, using gravitational technology to support its weight. Elevation to space, and back down is easy. Transport pods. Using high-technology balloons, it lifts the pod to space and can then be thrust using electric thrusters. Similar method when landing on a planet. Planetary vehicles. Gravity truck, a main vehicle for transporting goods. Gravity buggy. It's like a car. Gravity bike, a simple, easy, and flexible transportation vehicle. Gravity tank, a planetary war vehicle. Gravity and time technology. It says it itself. It bends them. Time, though, should be seen as not one dimension but multiple. As such, bending time is more complex. As such, time technology is not just one type of technology. Similar to how wheels and jet engines are not the same. One is the perception of time, and with that, speed itself. The next is the actual bending of time. Two separate dimensions. Cities. Megacities are cities that hold more than 1 billion people. Colonial cities is not based on the amount of people they hold. It varies, but it's a city tasked with making a planet inhabitable and beneficial to NUS. Adaptive cities can be anything. Basically, cities not built by living math that have naturally grown into their own form. Living math. This can seem like AI. So let me paint the function clearly here. Think of a complex equation. Now you see another one that contradicts this equation, but still, they both give the same result. Living math is like that. Two, maybe more equations dancing with each other, contradicting each other, but still, they both tell the truth. It's a complex math formula. The more complex, they can even give different results and still be telling the truth while contradicting each other. This is the very function of living math. The better they contradict each other, the better the function is. It's almost living. When one equation fails, the other can compensate. But it's not true self-regulation. There is no black box. You can clearly see what's happening to the equation. If something goes wrong, you can clearly see where and how. But a well-made living math can calculate beyond the observable and even see things that are otherwise invisible. Planetary categories. Living. This one is a planet with considerable life on it. Resource. This is a resource-rich planet. Beauty. A planet used for recreational wants. Threat. Something lives on this planet that could cost NUS more than it's worth. Ripe. A planet that can be taken with no real risk. Dead. A planet with nothing on it. The only potential is terraforming. Sentient. A planet with sentience on it. Wild. Dangerous wildlife. Chaos. A world where reality itself is bent. A world influenced by the clashing of threads. Terraforming. This is just the same as shrinking technology, but on a bigger scale. Sometimes it's too expensive. Sometimes it can be cheap, but it takes a longer time. Weapons. Gravity pools are like controlled black holes. They don't need anything, but they destroy still. Their gravitational effect can be changed and set to a specific setting. Strength and size can be changed. Shrink gun. A weapon that shrinks biological objects to a preset size. Time distortion. It catches a zone and slows time down, and the time influence can be manipulated, so it goes faster or slower, to a very precise extent. Laser rifles. A weapon that is recharged by sunlight and fires deadly rounds. These weapons can be loaded onto basically anything. Radar technology. Using living math, different variables can be read. Things that are usually invisible become visible. As such, it sees details far beyond what current-day technology can. Combined with time manipulation, that can make speed almost entirely meaningless. Radar technology can sense almost anything to a high degree. A spaceship entering NUS borders at nanosecond speed. NUS has already seen it and responded. All numbers are measured, gravitational and light, even other forms of distortions that are beyond what is visible. Heightened technology. Time technology is usually implemented in most NUS technology, compensating for any mistakes math can make, also even compensating for human errors as well. By creating small pockets of time, it gives humans, and math time, to fix any possible mistakes. This principle is used in almost anything and everything NUS relies on. Think of it like infinite cognitive speed. Almost. Soldiers. The NUS standard soldier equipment is a wrist gun. Basically, it can be loaded with any weapon and shift between them. Combined with fast deploying technology, math combined with time manipulation. There is little need for aim, also when you consider how powerful their weapons are. The real strength of an NUS soldier is the combination of all their weapon types and tactically shifting between them. NUS soldiers are also equipped with glasses with time distortion technology built into them, which, combined with living math, adapts to the battlefield. The glasses show different readings, basically what the living math sees, as feedback in numbers. The glasses also serve as a tool that maintains cognitive speed at the most optimal level by manipulating time. The soldier basically sees the world in slow motion, as much as needed to maintain the best level of focus. To slow, they lose focus. Quick enough, they are still in the fight. And that's automatically done, based on living math. Rule. NUS is fully democratic, with the only exception being the amendments. As such, the people of NUS, in a legal sense, are the real rulers of NUS. But in a more practical way, it's the rich. They lead propaganda and promises, using their wealth to influence society in their desired ways. Ruling means nothing if you don't know how society works. As such, the rich know how to rule. Unconventional equipment and technology. Some expansions and explorations within the galaxy are outside the normal standard equipment and technology of NUS. As such, some people and some cities find new ways to handle unforeseen obstacles. A chaotic world where the concept of math is erased would require such ingenuity. Lexicon, the world. The rifts. Each person has imaginations and their own understanding of how reality works. We think we adapt to reality, but it is reality that adapts to us. What we think is real, reality tries to make real. But there are so many people thinking different things, and reality tries to make each reality real. When we look at the world, we try to make sense of it, and reality helps us with that by making our sense real. Each time we think of reality in this way, it splits, not into a parallel universe, but a parallel probability. This probability takes the form of a string. Each person lives with uncountable strings, reaching out to reality. Around us, they find ways to make everything make sense. Sometimes, there are lapses in that. As such, Mandela effects appear. Not because anyone is wrong, but all are right at the same time. Reality just shifted for a short moment to fit everyone. Reality is not set in stone. It's a shifting thing. And when these strings clash too hard, sometimes those shifts can be experienced. The rifts, they are the worst cases of this, where the imaginations clash so hard that reality bends too much. Where reality bends beyond what's reasonable. All these probable strings are taken to the extreme. All possibilities within human imagination and interpretations of what is real open up. The rifts is the opening of the human imagination, reaching out from each string. Each life in the world lives on as raw imagination and influence, even after death. I touch a stone, and that stone will remember it, as a string is left inside it. Even though it's not conscious, that touch will reach out to reality. As such, the rift is not just each specific human's imagination. It's also every possibility that could have been. It's not just human influence, but the influence of the universe itself, feeding its own imagination. Imagination, in this sense, is not just fantasy. It's what exists beyond what can be observed. I can continue and try to explain what the rifts are, but at this point, I will just go around in circles. Anyways, these strings, they shape reality. And if enough align the right way, you can bend it. This isn't mysticism or magic, it's science. NUS has learned to measure and manipulate. People of old Earth used to call it quantum physics. They made two big mistakes, thinking that quantum collapse was real, and thinking that the multiverse was real. None of them is. NUS expansion. The expansion of NUS has taken a natural path that splits the galaxy into two sides to some extent. The NUS borders create a wall that splits a big portion of the galaxy into two sides. On one side, the Federation exists, trying to survive, escape NUS, sometimes fight NUS troops, and sometimes save other species. On the other side, another powerful species seems to grow, or at least a species with high potential. They are called the Nufirams. Nufirams. They are a species with a strong warrior culture. It's one of the big reasons NUS doesn't want to start a war with them. After the incident with the Federation super soldier, NUS is wary of any warrior-type cultures. But this one specifically, since they have a high reproduction rate, combined with a warrior spirit and culture. They are one of the few species NUS doesn't provoke. But since they have such a deep warrior culture, they also have a high death rate. If they ever find a good system encouraging systematic growth, they would become a real threat to NUS. As such, they are considered the only species that NUS is in constant preparation to start a war with. Their reproduction rate would be similar to 12 if compared to human measures. And this is without any technological or progressive assistance. NUS currently don't provoke them, as they worry that what happened on Earth could happen with the Nufirams. A war starting an unstoppable progression within technology and systemic stability, which would make Nufirams a true threat to NUS. So for now, NUS doesn't get involved with Nufirams, but compared to the NUS, the Nufirams basically live in the Stone Ages. But still, they can travel through space. They just don't have as sophisticated a systematic structure or technological advancements as NUS. Their reproduction rate is not 12, or it is, but not functionally. Their warrior culture works against their reproductive rate, and as such, they consider their own kind expendable. On top of that, their warrior culture cherishes fighting, death, and strength. Their future is an enigma, but currently, they are not a real threat. Only their potential is. NUS fears what would happen to such a species if they ever experienced such an existential war that gave birth to NUS. The Federation may have a much smaller population and even smaller reproductive potential than NUS. But this doesn't necessarily mean they are weak. The Federation has great perspectives. They see the world from more angles than NUS. One great example is how they favor chaotic planets. NUS tend to avoid them, as they don't follow the normal laws of reality. But the Federation is well suited for such planets. There is always one species amongst NUS that sees reality from a perspective that fits the chaotic nature of chaotic planets. Not to mention that Federation AI is better suited for adaptation than NUS living math. As such, more difficult or more alien environments are perfect for the Federation, and they often find technological solutions that lie outside human nature, something NUS probably would never figure out. So even if they are fewer, their diverse ideology helps them in many difficult circumstances. Soul threads. The threads that extend from each person are not just threads of probability, of what the person could or couldn't be. They are much more than that. The person themselves is just a thread, and in reality, they are something bigger than the thread themselves. Each thread exists behind a source that extends outwards towards the seen and unseen. There is a part of each individual that is never seen, and to that individual themselves, never experienced. In this sense, the source and the threads themselves extend far beyond the personhood. Soul death. This is when the threads are severed from the core, when the threads no longer connect with anything, when the core becomes something separated from reality entirely, when an abyss of nothingness is created instead. This is what the followers of the Commander truly strive for, without directly knowing it, but they feel it. They seek to make reality into this abyss, seeking the powerful feeling of a soul dying. Lexicon, the Federation. Technology. The Federation has almost the same technology as NUS, just not as well developed. But what the Federation does have is stable and well-developed AI that can do things that NUS technology can't. Against NUS, their gravitational and time manipulation technology is useless, as NUS possesses much more powerful tools and weapons. But the Federation does have an advantage in AI, being able to perform greater automated tasks. AI is used in everything: vehicles, weapons, and the societal system. As such, many issues within the Federation are easily fixed. Any transportation is more fluid, any weapon more precise. But still, such advantages often mean little when NUS is directly more powerful, has stronger weapons, more resources, and so on. Super Soliders. The Federation super soldiers are humans trained to reach their peak, relying entirely on their instincts, to the furthest extent, a training process that is both intense and takes a long time to fulfill. While using an AI trained to reach beyond its limit, the AI is trained to accept absolute failure without collapse and trained to do something that would be beyond its nature. In this sense, the training of a super soldier AI is, in itself, just as rough and as time-consuming. The super soldier is not just one entity, it's a symbiosis to an utterly mastered degree between AI and human. Each a separate entity, but they are trained to link almost on a spiritual level. As such, something with supernatural strength is made. An exoskeleton fully controlled by the AI, attached to the human, is used. The symbiosis matters, as the AI must learn to trust utterly and completely in the human's instinct. So even if the AI steers, its understanding and symbiosis with the human is what ultimately makes the super soldier. The AI has to adapt to the human to such an extent that it feels like the human is steering everything. As such, the soul link has been established, where two entities work as one. After this, the AI can't be used for anything else but being the absolute companion to the human. Fernides. The Fernides are a species that has joined the Federation. The most notable side to them is their ability to reach into the abyss. In this, they have learned to create soul threads as such, creating probabilities out of nothingness. As such, they can often be incredible strategic masterminds, as they find solutions that are either invisible or impossible to other species. Volmets. This species has a special trait. Their senses are far beyond that of any other species. Because of their heightened senses, they can literally feel everything sway around them. Each tiny particle, each movement of a cell, they can feel. Because they can feel them so closely, they can touch them. Think of it like this. They can push one tiny particle, bake it, clash it into another, and then another, until there is a butterfly effect. Because of this, they have almost telekinetic capabilities when trained properly. Garians. These are big, strong, and sturdy aliens. They are built like tanks and can hold big equipment. Even though they may seem big and stupid, they are not. They are, in fact, very intelligent. but they like to keep things simple. Weapons. Rifle. This one is a relic, but is sometimes used. It fires bullets at much higher speeds than those of the year 20XX. Standard auto laser rifle. It uses AI to help aiming. It's almost impossible to miss, unless time distortion causes miscalculations. Beam rifle. It is a laser rifle, except it produces a constant beam. Gravity launcher. It launches gravitational fields. Energy launcher. It launches explosive projectiles. Instead of gravity, it creates energetic damage. Laser sword. This is a sword made of laser. As super soldiers sometimes like high speed, they can end up in close combat, where this weapon is favored. Gravitational shields. It protects against most attacks. Reinforced. Shields. These shields are usually only used when fighting NUS, where their gravitational shields are useless. Scope. This can be attached to most rifles. Radio signal. One of the most important sides of the Federation is the radio signal they are sending out to space. It's not really a radio signal. It's something more like a math signal, influencing certain things in reality. It sends a hidden message, hidden only to the NUS. The message is inviting any and all species in the galaxy, even beyond, to join the Federation in the name of diversity. Using AI, the Federation can outsmart NUS in this specific area. Federation's hand. The Federation is reaching out to other species, but for multiple reasons, it's not always successful. Sometimes NUS gets them first. Other times, the species don't want to join the Federation. But the Federation is currently trying to recruit multiple species. AI. The Federation's AI is either conscious or so good at imitating consciousness that it can just as well be conscious. As such, AI is treated similarly to an independent member of the Federation. Home planet. The Federation has found a safe haven, a place that NUS won't easily harm them. This planet is a chaotic planet, where gravity itself is twisted. As such, any gravitational technology is useless, as gravitational technology is the one biggest danger to any super soldier. This gives the Federation a strong foothold. The planet has been named Luna, referring to their old moon on Earth, a symbol of a faint, beautiful light. Lexicon, Nufirums. Technology. They don't have gravity nor time-based technology. They are too rough-headed for that. They are not stupid. They just have too powerful a spirit to think of the finer elements of reality. As such, they use big and powerful constructs and big engines with accurate math. They do have similar energy technology as humans do, and laser weapons. As such, they are not considered harmless, but primitive still. Philosophy. Just like NUS, they believe in their own natural spirit. As such, they don't build AI. They don't even naturally think about such technology. They think mostly about the warrior spirit, which often makes them want to do everything with their bare hands. In this sense, they are a tough species, willing to face any and everything head-on. As such, AI is far from something conceptual to them. Even the living math of NUS is something they wouldn't consider. Culture. The Nufirams like to fight and have a close spiritual connection to both fighting and dying. They don't see death as anything negative. For this reason, there is a lot of fighting and death within their culture, and they can afford such a culture considering their very high reproductive rate. But it's also the very reason they don't grow as quickly as NUS. But even then, they could be considered to have a much more powerful spirit than humans. Space travel. They use big machines that fight against gravity rather than with it. Big machines with big engines. Their spaceship is much larger than that which NUS uses. On top of that, their spaceships usually have all-in-one functions. They can fight, and they can transport people cargo, and war machines. As such, Nufirums usually always only use one type of starship. These starships lack the faster-than-light technology that NUS uses. As such, they usually either live or die on their ships, or they create hibernation chambers. But their technology is not as well developed as NUS preservation chambers for the inhabitants of the ship. As such, the space travelers of Nufirum ships tend to die during their space travels. Either they spend generations on their ships, or they risk dying in their hibernation chambers. War machines. When they fight on land, they use war machines. Drones, tanks, flying aircraft, and artillery are a few of the common types of weapons they use. But their most preferred way of combat is more direct. Soldier against soldier. They prefer their own strength over that of machines, if they can force such outcomes. Resilience. Their spirit, combined with their reproductive rate, creates a very resilient species. Even when a faction within their species is almost eradicated, they tend to always spring back to life again. This trait of their species is what makes NUS extra cautious of them. They are not easily killed, or rather, not to the extent of extinction. A few can quickly and easily reproduce. On top of that, their spirit is resilient. Their morals, their spirit, seem to always be unwavering. And there isn't anything that NUS couldn't conquer or annihilate if they truly wanted to. In this sense, NUS is unstoppable. The only reason they don't destroy everything is because they don't want to waste resources. If something is too risky, that equals losses. In this sense, they seek only profit and minimal loss, but they always find a solution to any risk, and they can always afford to wait until they find the solution. People such as the commander are always born. Most people within NUS are special in some way and capable of solving some of the most complex problems. But sometimes, one who's beyond special comes forth, and that's what the commander is, someone who's invincible in its truest sense. Just to compare the power scale, anyone within the higher echelon could easily wipe out the Federation if they found a good enough reason. The commander is even further beyond that scale of power. He is in another dimension of power. The commander is closer to a world-ending level of power, but it's not fully certain he is. The only reason he hasn't wiped out the Federation is because his focus is more inwards, towards NUS itself. But this does not mean his intentions aren't aimed towards the Federation as well, as the Federation is also part of the human expansion into outer space. Even as the unstoppable force that the commander is, he is still, in a sense, a victim to the NUS system. Second book, World of Debt Rulebook and Everyday Life. Rule number 1. No one is stronger than NUS. NUS is inevitable, ever-expanding, and undefeatable. Rule number 2. Other factions can win against NUS in small battles, but lose the bigger war. Rule number 3. Other factions can avoid NUS, flee, or hide in places NUS can't reach them. Rule number 4. NUS must be portrayed as a horror, that if you can understand them today, you won't tomorrow. They grow, they evolve. If you won against them today, you will lose tomorrow. Rule number 5. NUS. They always become worse than they were before, and they always find new ways to be more cruel and indifferent. Rule number 6. NUS. Always growing quickly, one way or another, population and technology never stagnate. Rule number 7. The only way for good to survive is by prioritizing evacuation. Rule number 8. NUS do not seek conquest nor war. They seek to satiate their own desires and to survive. As such, survival means growing. Rule number 9. If you can think of any depravity, there is someone within NUS doing it. Rule number 10. No one has higher technology, nor a higher total population, than NUS. Rule number 11. The NUS soldiers are not weak. They are amongst the strongest on an individual scale. Maybe not in raw strength, but in tactical capability. And they are even more powerful when combined into groups, and even further when used along war machines, such as orbital bombardments or gravity tanks. Rule number 12. NUS tends to use a few weapons, tools, buildings, and such, because why use many varieties of something when you can make one that is good for everything? Rule number 13. The only advantage any species or faction can have over NUS is spiritual strength or diverse views beyond the human. NUS still has a strong human spirit, and their views are as diverse as humanly possible. In spiritual strength, things such as morals, the will to do something with your own hands, and such are included. Rule number 14. Look at the spirit like this. You can create the perfect math, the perfect function, and the perfect mechanism. But there will always be a crack, a place where something can flow through, an element of unpredictability. The spirit is that which sees beyond the perfect. It's what flows through the cracks. It's not magical. It is something very real. When something is generally one way, the spirit is what finds the other way. When something is guaranteed 99.99% sure, basically 100% guaranteed, the spirit is what reaches for and finds that 0.01%. It's not plot armor. It's the spirit, not even in a joking or metaphorical manner, literally. Rule number 15. The way NUS looks at the Nufirams and the Federation is not like competitors. It's more like bugs they can't fully kill. Maybe a bit more than bugs. Bugs that can ruin their home and gnaw at their walls, but can't fully kill. Rule number 16. There is no magic in this world. Everything has a scientific meaning. Though the science of NUS is much more advanced than that which we have in our modern day. They can see science beyond the mathematical spectrum or beyond knowledge. To NUS, science is the unknown and making sense of it, which is what NS-MPE does. Rule number 17. When talking about NUS, we are talking about a faction of humanity close to reality-bending technology. Rule number 18. NUS doesn't discover technology and master that discovery. They discover something and quickly go to the next discovery. For example, they invent the phone, then they are satisfied and quickly move on to the next thing. They don't discover the iPhone 18. Maybe they invent the iPhone 1. But they don't explore every tiny aspect of each discovery. They rather expand quickly to the next step. As such, their technology grows, uses the most essential, and goes on. As such, their technology progresses quickly, and they don't waste time on small details. But they do add improvements. They just don't focus on them. NUS scientists focus much more on reaching the next big technological step, because NUS focuses more on key details rather than every detail. They are always ahead in technology. Rule number 19. Nufirams never go extinct. Rule number 20. The Federation always survives, and they always try to save others and seek diversity. Rule number 21. NUS is an absolute democracy and extremely free. These two sides of NUS are never corrupted. Rule number 22. The rifts are a manifestation of imagination influencing reality. This includes any mind that exists within reality, including the universe itself. As such, it's bigger than any mind, as it is the full spectrum of that mind itself, even beyond its normal limit. As such, that mind itself bends reality and influences the rifts. Think of it like this. It extends even further than what you could ever do, and into your imagination itself, and any probable imagination, and manifests a reality out of that. As such, no matter how far your mind can reach, the rift reaches further. Even if you were a god, this rift would expand its potential simply by your very existence and create every possibility beyond your reach. It's beyond the concept of omnipotence, as it is an antithesis to it. You can traverse it, but you can never reach the end of it. What if you are a god? What if you aren't a god? What if the concept of God didn't exist? What if you were something bigger than a god? Everything would spread out and create a bigger rift, as long as your potential imagination could stretch that far. Not just your imagination, but the very potential of it, even beyond what you can imagine. But what you could potentially imagine. All of it affecting the fundamentals of reality on an invisible plane. But in the rifts, all existing in a real way. And it's all possible because probability existed before the Big Bang. The way it works is that imagination is related to probability, as each thing you can imagine has a certain level of probability. As such, your imagination becomes the very scalpel that shapes the Big Bang, as not only do your probabilities tangle with yourself, but reality itself. And as reality shapes upon itself, your imagination becomes a part of it. As such, when the universe remembers itself, it also remembers your imagination, and all of it connects to the existence before the Big Bang. As such, it all affects our world, the Big Bang, and all the Big Bang probabilities. Not only do you perceive reality, but reality itself is perceiving itself, and as such, influencing these effects even further. Rule number 23. There are no heroes inside NUS. Rule number 24. The Federation planets are a safe haven for any species in the NUS universe, and they are the most powerful faction, besides NUS. And all of these safe havens are chaotic planets of different types. These chaotic planets are the only locations where NUS faces significant challenges, giving the Federation their only real strategic advantage. Rule number 25. There are many untold stories in the year 2300. Rule number 26. There are many planets and species to explore inside the NUS universe. Rule number 27. NUS has plot armor. Rule number 28. Any conflict involving the commander should be seen as fighting God himself. Impossible, and escape is almost not possible. Rule number 29. NUS must maintain the feeling of humanity being a cosmic/eldritch horror. Rule number 30. Uncertainty is the main ontological foundation, followed by probability. The world refuses total knowability even to itself. Nothing ever fully reaches 100%. Part 1. Scientific details. The technology used during the War of Russia and NUS. Let's explain the time technology and what happened in more detail. As AI can think at high speed, NUS doesn't just change the effect of time, they make it fluctuate. So the AI won't know if things go too fast or too slow. As such, NUS technology works against AI. Trapping AI isn't just about making things slower. This the AI can still predict and create countermeasures for. So the time distortion fluctuates when used against AI. The fluctuation is used with living math, creating a pattern impossible to predict. So either a bullet is traveling too slowly, or it is traveling too fast. And it fluctuates too quickly for the AI to know which it is. This technology is usually used to keep targets inside a time bubble, where they become easy targets for any soldiers to shoot. The time technology and such cooperates with the soldiers, making it easier for them to target their enemy. And it works against the enemy, making it impossible to know how to avoid being shot. It calculates odds and probability and helps on both of these fronts. So when the super soldier incident happened, it was because AI could not predict which bullets would hit them or not. The human, using the AI capability to predict at higher speeds, began a symbiosis, where the human instinct to avoid what is beyond comprehension combined with AI to perceive higher speeds. It's a difficult situation, which is why there was only one lucky combo that succeeded in experiencing this. Think of it like this: being so good that you can hit a moving bullet midair. It's not impossible, but it's far beyond what is considered normal. It requires extraordinary human capability. That's what happened. The human could feel his instincts and began fighting something impossible. He was the first person to be hitting an airborne bullet. After that, people knew it was possible and began training for it. The AI tries to connect with such a human, and from that, it knows how to act. The AI perceives these higher speeds and relies on human instincts. AI is the fastest when it comes to cognitive speed. Living math is faster only because it's not cognitive. So as such, AI can see the fluctuations. It just can't predict them. But using human instincts, it can bypass the need to predict. So the human and AI symbiosis is very real in this sense. And that's what creates the Federation's super soldiers. The conversation between the AI and human was not verbal. It's more like a psychic link. It uses quantum probability, where the AI not only predicts what the human thinks, but also looks through the probability realm. As such, it finds with high precision what it is the human is actually thinking. The more the human tries to let the AI know what they think, the more accurately it knows it. And this happens on a subconscious level. Many things factor into this. One thought can expand into many probabilities. The more your mind is open, the more signs will be shown in each probability. Body language, tones, maybe even smaller signs. So just your thoughts alone affect the probability realm. As such, the more open you are, the more the AI can read your mind. It's not actual mind reading, but it's close to it. Gravitational technology is not creating gravity out of nothing or anything like that. Material possesses its own gravitational values. Gravitational technology simply manipulates this. There can be no more gravitation than the material itself produces. But that which is there can be manipulated. In this sense, the smallest thing, such as a pebble, can be gravitationally manipulated, to the biggest, such as a black hole. So the difference between a black hole or gravitational technology is that a black hole is itself something. The gravitational technology simply manipulates something, but isn't anything in itself. If you want to know what is more powerful, a black hole or the gravitational technology of NUS, let me state it simply like this. Using NUS technology, it's possible to draw energy out of a black hole, manipulating the gravitational effects of a black hole, siphoning it the right way to create energy. But this is a big project. Even for NUS, it's similar to creating a wind turbine or water turbine, where you draw gravitational forces through an energy generator. The energy needed to manipulate such enormous gravitational pulls is even greater. But using energetically high, cost-efficient technology, it is possible. Many of NUS's war machines use gravitational shields that can deflect almost anything.
These shields can be strained and broken, but it is a process that is greatly difficult. Usually, if they are broken, it's done through a high focus on physical projectiles, time manipulation, and energy weapons. Sometimes gravity technology itself is used to weaken such shields. But it's not an easy process, especially when such shields adapt their gravitational fluctuation as they are being attacked. Since the shield doesn't create a gravitational force, it just manipulates that which exists. As such, any projectiles with gravity in them can be used as a defense themselves, which is another reason why most gravity tanks are incredibly heavy, as it further strengthens the gravity shield. And any weapons that do bypass the shield will have to penetrate a hull that is, in itself, incredibly sturdy, simply by the nature of its weight. As such, a gravity tank is incredibly difficult to destroy. And if you consider it is usually always supported by infantry, it's usually considered a fruitless attempt to try and take on a gravity tank. Space-based military follows this rule. NUS thinks of as small ships as possible, with as big guns as possible. If the gun can shoot through anything, then build a small ship onto that gun. And in such, create a swarm of ships rather than any big easy targets. Use those resources for more guns rather than more hull. As such, you have a more powerful and much more cost-efficient military. A space armada that can take on anything. The rifts and the threads are probability. Everything exists within probability, but not just your own, probability, and what your observation of the world creates. It's also the probability of what the universe could be. You create different lines of probability within reality, and so does the person next to you, until all people are woven together into a big weave of probability. Now imagine the same probability exists at the birth of the Big Bang. Even further, before the Big Bang, imagine someone held a surgical knife right before the Big Bang and could do anything to it. That in itself makes the Big Bang into many threads before it even explodes. Even before time, all of these threads were spreading out. That's the rifts, unimaginable probabilities, and immeasurable to anyone within a singular universal probability. The soul is not just one person. It is every probability at the same time, and the influence that person has over that probability. It may sound simple, but it's much more complex than it sounds. Imagine that probability isn't just probability, that it is something split, all existing at the same time without actually having to exist. But for this example, imagining that they all do exist, it helps paint the picture. So each probability splits. They exist. Each version of you. All of those people are you, but you are currently only conscious of one of them. But your soul is all of them. It feels all of them. And this thread, it's not stagnant. It spreads out continuously, splitting, touching the world, and influencing it, even the parts you never realize. All of that is a part of your soul. So imagine all of that condensed into one place, an omni-version of you. That's your soul. It's not spiritual, it's science. But even then, it can be holy, and in that, it becomes spiritual. Quick production technology is technology that uses living math to automatically create something. The thing it tries to create is designed after a blueprint, so the math knows what to create. This technology usually uses gravity trucks, automated skylifts, excavators, and other construction-based vehicles, all based on gravity technology that can build enormous constructions as well as smaller ones. These machines usually allow the living math to do the procedure but have sensory inputs for when humans are needed. But usually, this technology can do everything, automated, as long as the blueprint is well designed. Time manipulation and its effect on the mind are more complicated than they would seem. It's not as easy as slowing or quickening time. Because time is divided into multiple dimensions. One affects the perception. When we reach the speed of light, our interpretation of time changes. The next is more related to actual speed, as time and speed are very closely related. But for now, the interpretation of time is what matters most. This happens in many different ways. Sometimes we feel time goes past quickly, sometimes slowly. When we reach the speed of light, time flies by. So, our perception of time also matters, not just speed. This is what is used for conscious-based time manipulation. We make time feel irrelevant, and as such, it becomes so. We perceive time from a different angle, the angle from which we perceive everything in slow motion or fast motion. In this sense, NUS technology, when it comes to time, is in fact two separate things. One could even say their probability-based technology could be a third version of time, a third time-based technology. As such, what we call the dimension of time is not just one dimension, but a combination of three, creating a complete form. Similar to how a cube works. The scientific world of NUS is mostly like a forum where people share their ideas. And some people learn to use those ideas. There is not much ownership of any idea or technology in that sense, but there is value in people who understand the ideas, who can use the technology. As such, the forums can serve as a medium to earn money still. And people who can make use of intelligent scientists tend to be those who do well in society. As such, even if sharing information for free can seem like a waste of time, money, and energy, or that someone else will steal your idea, it's not, because clever people always see the potential in those who truly understand and those with real potential. In fact, the people who progress inside the NUS economy do so because they see potential in others. As such, the scientific forums of NUS becomes a job market in itself. And Living Math makes it easier to find these special individuals. It's a system that is very honest. Debt market in a more direct way. Anything that has not gone past the bankrupt level does not appear in the debt market. But once something is considered bankrupt, which for a person means they have amassed more debt than they can ever repay, they appear in the debt market. The debt market itself can trace how close something is to entering it. Once it is inside the debt market, it can be sold at any time, but it won't happen instantly. The debt market will try to sell it for a higher price, calculating the probability of its price, and try to keep the pricing high. As time goes on, the price is lowered, like a graph, until the debt is paid. The money is paid to the one to whom the money was owed, even if that is multiple people. All of this happens automatically, where only the buyer is the active participant. The legal system is made of judges, hired through taxes, and a computational system where people within society can participate. As such, anyone who is to be judged by the system will be so by the people, using the judges as a medium. If any judges are considered inadequate, they can be voted out. Any legal fees are paid to the system to fund taxes if there is no victim of the crime. As such, lowering the taxation on the rest of the inhabitants of NUS. Because of how competitive the NUS society is, most people need to loan money just to just to have the chance to earn money. As only the special, the rich tend to survive such a competitive market. Some are lucky and find something stable, where they don't need to be special, but still find a way to live inside NUS. Even though NUS doesn't have any institutions that brainwash people, or anything like that. Still, the rich do have great influence, through propaganda and promises. Not to mention how susceptible ordinary people are to the pack mentality. Promises of a better life. Many techniques are used to manipulate people within society, even without institutional brainwashing. Some are even easily convinced to believe in NUS as they hope to one day be one of the richer members. In a realistic sense, the power within society is with the rich, as they can influence society further than any other can, buying what's needed to maintain their power through an almost completely free market. Secondly, the enforcement office holds the next level of power, having the actual tools to enforce the laws, and if democratically supported, has the power to even apprehend the rich.
Any colonizing city will use the natural resources of their planet. As an example, if there is a sturdy plant species, they will use it for their structures. So building a city on a mushroom planet, they could possibly build furniture and buildings out of mushrooms that could fit such a function. This is just an example. Usually the military is made of lower-class members of NUS, and sometimes these members can earn an income by gathering aliens to be sold to the rich. Humans who have gone through any physical alterations are still considered humans, such as the NUS. Though they may be looked down on, even hated, the morphed are still considered humans, but when they break the law, which the mindless will do, they are subject to punishment. Tiny prisoners are contained in one out of two types of containers. A container that utilizes anesthetics so that the tiny prisoners don't need to be fed. Containers without anesthetics, where they do need to be fed, but considering their size, not much. Some are smaller, some are bigger, and some can contain multiple people, which are usually the preferred containers, as they are more cost-efficient. The economic flow is protected by NUS enforcement and overseen by the public at all times. The math is visible to everyone, and when any observed numbers are proven to be manipulated, NUS enforcement officers are utilized. As such, no banking system is needed to protect the flow of money. The goggles of an NUS soldier don't just show the living math. The living math does many things at the same time. An example, which I have not yet mentioned, is that they can rearrange which probabilities to observe, such as the probabilities of a wall, choosing to see through it. Living math can assist in many of these functions and can be tuned based on what's needed. So their function is not a simple one that can be defined in any singular way. Another example is that the living math inside the goggles can predict what will happen, using the probability realm. It can predict most likely goals, and so on. Most of it is done through a quantum-attuned, semi-psychic link between the user and their goggles. But in case it's necessary, there are manual ways to tune the goggles. In direct ways, such as these goggle functions, the living math never makes any mistakes. In NUS, quantum physics can even be applied to biomanipulation, where a mind can open up to perceive the quantum probability realm. It won't think through it as fast as living math, but it will perceive it. Similar to unlocking a sixth sense or experiencing a new dimension. Part 2. NUS Everyday Life. NUS has a symbol, like the flag of a country. It's a red and blue shield with two wings stretching out, and the wings are glittering. Every member of NUS owns a wrist hologram, a tiny computer that shows them all they need and functions like a phone. Almost all citizens have a wall projector, something like a TV, but it can appear on any desired wall simply by pointing. In NUS, they have one big megalithic market for the entire city. The school in a megacity is the center of the entire city, and it's like a large, wide tower. A megacity has different levels. The lower levels, where everyone visits, transportation in and out of the city. Then there's the upper, lower levels, where the poor live. And then it goes up until it reaches the top, where people can see the sky. The richest live at the top. On the upper levels, there are parks and more aesthetics, plants, and even statues. The upper levels are actually beautiful and pleasant. There are pathwalks going around and between buildings. You can see the symbol of NUS some places, often close to the enforcement buildings. Some people do have their own small local shops for designers or other such things. Parts of the megacity are designed for smaller people, usually middle-class members, who want to avoid debt, so they have created homes and communities for smaller people. As such, some buildings have been divided into much smaller segments for such small people. Think of it as small districts, only for tiny people, where they live somewhat ordinary lives, inside a smaller section of the megacity. They live just like any other, but in smaller spaces, and they get products delivered to their small district. They are responsible for this small district and still work and contribute to society. Any children of tiny people are resized and incorporated into the schooling system. The cities of NUS are almost always built from wood and metal. The job market is filled with almost all roles that exist today, but they are different since most utilize living math and advanced technology. So most people are trained in advanced technology, handling tools far beyond what we use today, in much different ways. But the job still exists, but often with much fewer openings. The biggest portion of jobs inside NUS is leaning towards science and math, or they are economically related. NUS society does have automated technology and robots, but they are not fully self-sufficient. They greatly help society, but they do require at least a small amount of human assistance to function. Sometimes they get stuck and are incapable of figuring out the solution, but this doesn't happen often, as their designs are usually very advanced and capable of avoiding problems. But the key importance is that these machines do not have self-regulative capabilities. When they face a problem, they can't change their way to handle problems. Because of that, these automated machines and robots either need simple tasks, or when they do more complicated tasks, they end up in situations they can't solve. But even then, they are very complicated and help society more than they cause issues. Blueprints and designs are usually installed to make them good at specific tasks. When it comes to home designs, most megacities are just a big city built on top of another big city, with another on top of that, until you have billions of people living on top of each other. And all those buildings are filled with apartments. Some are bigger than others, some fancier than others. But they are all apartments still, except for the upper levels. On top of the megacity, unique housing is built, housing that is designed for the preferences of the rich people who live there. And all of these houses and apartments in the lower, middle, and upper levels are still very familiar to what we have today. But also, they can possess traits of older designs, such as old Roman designs, or old Chinese, or Japanese designs. Inside these homes, the decorations tend to be similar to modern designs. For entertainment, NUS possesses high-level simulations. Technology that doesn't just create a virtual reality you can emerge into. No, it's technology that directly influences your senses to fully experience the simulation. Using different vibrations, sound can be simulated, and light and other stimulations are used until the individual fully perceives the simulation. These devices are not very large. They are just like a VR headset, but the function is not the same. A VR headset tries to show you an image, create sound. The simulations of NUS target your stimulations directly. As such, anything can be simulated, felt, and experienced fully. People create different designs for such simulations, where different things can be experienced. And these simulations do have fully functional safety features to prevent any harm to the user. Computers tend to be very similar to what they are today in the modern era, an old relic, but with an undying design. Why change what is already working and has been for so long? And they are usually used like an old and reliable tool. But just like an old reliable tool such as a hammer, it may have its more modern version. Computers have taken on a more futuristic style. The possibilities of the simulation technology tend to fulfill most of what people want. As such, it is the singular biggest reason why people inside NUS feel empty and seek excess. Imagine being able to do anything, live out any fantasy, and then come back to reality. Only to realize there are some things you can do in reality that you can't do in a simulation. Interact with real emotions that aren't yours, belonging to someone else, as an example. Since NUS doesn't have any banking system, just an economic measurement and distribution of resources. One job that may not exist inside NUS, or multiple jobs, is that related to banking. Another job that may not exist, which is closely related, is accounting. Since most people either can't afford it, or they have everything under control themselves. Inside cities, people either use gravity bikes, vertical elevators, or horizontal escalators to transport themselves around. In the lower levels, gravity trunks tend to move in and out of the city with products and trade goods. At the edges of the upper levels of the megacity, a tiny wall, like a fence, goes around so people don't fall over, and they can still look over the horizon. Because of NUS technology, the only people who ever die of natural causes are the middle-class members. Lower-class members of society tend to be sold to the market rather than dying naturally. The school inside a megacity is like a reverse prison, where children are fully protected. Outside the school, they are not as safe, but they can visit parents if they want to, or have any, or just see the city. Any orphans are registered into the school. Children can live in the school if they want to, and the school will provide everything and anything the kids need and want. To an extent, kids can't have anything too expensive. Teachers and caretakers are hired through the system, based on math and democratic voting. Paid by taxes. Part 3. Extra. Even though living math and AI are faster than human consciousness, and as such can go through the probability realm faster, human imagination possesses a greater influence over the probability realm. Human imagination is greater than what AI and living math can possess, more specifically AI. So for this reason, human consciousness within the probability realm is not lesser. Humans possess a greater influence over the probability realm. The psychological state within NUS is not so much oppressive as it is survival. People are not stuck in loops of keeping their head down. They are stuck in loops of trying to survive, like hungry animals. They keep sophisticated social interactions. The societal interactions are still sophisticated.
They act proper. They don't need to keep their heads down. In fact, keeping your head down could be a death sentence.
Not having a competitive mindset is what kills people. It's what makes them end up consumed by the system rather than supporting it. As such, the mindset is more like hungry animals, internally. But outwardly, people act normal. Inside, they still want things to be normal. They cling to a hope of a normal life. So they cling to the outward normal appearance. But only a few can actually survive, and most know this. As such, a level of depression always exists underneath the entire societal structure. It's worst at the lower levels, manageable at the middle levels, and barely existing at the upper levels. As such, the most prominent psychological state within NUS is that people want something normal and stable. Deep in their heart, they are stuck in survival mode and burdened by existential dread, all while trying to keep their heads up and fighting an almost unwinnable battle, where only the rich can fully live without that mental state, and the middle class feel it, but live normal lives. But the lower class are those who are truly burdened by it. Enforcers of different megacities do not just keep to standard military equipment. Their equipment can vary. But they do have shrink guns, anesthetic guns, and the same goggles used in the military. Those are standard enforcer equipments, but they do possess more powerful tools and weapons for more difficult circumstances. Military-grade equipment, and sometimes even beyond. The wrist gun used in the military is an example, which can project both time and gravitational effects, including laser projectiles. Besides that, they possess gravity shields, enormous weight, and gravitational shielding, so they defend against almost anything. These shields weigh a lot, but gravitational manipulation makes them weigh nothing to the user. As such, enforcers can secure areas in multiple ways and eliminate greater threats or capture almost anything. In the worst scenarios, enforcers can be supported by some rich members of society to enforce the law, making them the greatest power within NUS. And each enforcement office has a captain. The enforcers are recruited through democratic votes, and so is the captain as well. The captain is the one who manages the office in total, besides the democratic procedures and the lawmaking itself. Society, in all its aspects, is driven and ruled by democratic voting and applied through living math. The most normal occupation for middle-class members is tax-paying jobs. In a sense, the middle class can be considered the working class. The lower class is usually jobless, as the competitive market tends to be very harsh. The biggest roles a colonial city has are to explore the planet, build infrastructure, build population, prepare the world for NUS inhabitation, and estimate what the world is worth. Estimate if it's worth excavating for materials, if it's a beautiful planet worthy for the rich, if it's a planet worth building a whole megacity in, if it's worth building a space elevator and things like that. As such, a colonial city is one of the very few, basically only, places where the job market is not so harsh as to bring everyone into debt. The debt level in a colonial city is basically non-existent at the beginning, but it gradually escalates until a colonial city is just like any other city inside the NUS. One important thing to note, NUS don't hate that which is different, not the xeno, not that which is morphed. In fact, the members of NUS can very well love it, but they are still indifferent towards it and are still bound to treat it like it's an asset to their nation. They love that alien species. They buy them. They love that morphed horror. They buy it. And in that purchase, they can treat it how they want to until it's broken or until they are satisfied with it. In fact, NUS believes strongly in evolution, and as such, they are drawn to that which is different. They just do it in the coldest and most indifferent way possible, like it's property. The tiny people inside a tiny district are considered protected by the law of NUS. They also contribute to the society of NUS. As such, they are considered the same as any other inhabitant. They simply live a life with less economical risk, but higher physical risk. People raiding their inhabitants and so on. The people inside a tiny district are considered valuable goods to raiders. But this is highly illegal, and tiny people are rightfully protected by the enforcement office. The tiny people, usually being middle-class members, tend to still earn money, and as such, they will buy from the market. And the market delivers goods, just like it does to any other citizen of NUS. Usually, these districts are created by multiple tiny people, renting an area together, choosing jobs they can do in their tiny forms. They tend to become reliable at jobs where you can assist through a computer. A jack-of-all-trades type of support, as an example. They study to know a little bit about everything. As such, the rich can call them and get support in small areas of subjects they don't know about. This is one of the normal types of jobs these tiny people contribute to, like a call center or support, as they tend to be too small to do any tax-paying services, such as enforcement officers, teachers, or delivery. These districts are like any other, just smaller. Tiny computers and so on. To make things more fluid and manageable, they tend to create a more communal system where people help each other out. They share money amongst each other to buy big deliveries for everyone. Almost all alien species within the Federation have escaped their home planets to seek chaotic planets, where they can at least resist the expansions of NUS. Some chaotic planets are better than others. Some chaotic planets are less like normal planets, and as such, more difficult for NUS to deal with. When making assessments of the population of a planet, NUS calculates if they have any special traits that could be considered valuable. As slaves, entertainment, statistical purposes, sadistic games, basically anything. They will be categorized similarly to how people are categorized within the debt market. A value, how valuable are these species, based on their special traits, their intelligence, their capabilities, and so on. Anything within a planetary assessment possesses a value to the market. Sentient life could sometimes be the most valuable to those who seek recreational values that no NUS technology can produce. Soldiers for NUS are hired through a voting procedure. A desired number is calculated for each expansion and each military activity. As such, each spot is filled through a casual voting procedure. The voting system can be accessed by any citizen through a computer or wrist hologram. As such, any change they wish for can be fed into the voting system. Any voting related to the use of taxes can be implemented through it. Names pile up to choose people for different roles. Think of the stock market. A country can have a healthy stock market while still having a high inflation. People are getting richer, but still things are getting less affordable. This is what's happening in NUS. Also a few other factors, but mainly this. Let's say the country gets richer, but food gets more expensive, and salaries stay the same. Then the poor get poorer, even if the country gets richer, because only the rich benefit from the total income of the nation. So both are true. More people can't afford to live, but NUS still gets much, much richer. As such, loans stack faster and harsher. Combine this with a competitive market, where earning money in itself is difficult. Not being able to earn money, basically only living on loans. So a world that's harsh on the poor, combined with a harsh job market. It's like killing one bird with two stones. That bird has little chance to survive. The enforcement office has resizing machines, so that any tiny people can be collected and resized to the preferred size of the new owner. The reason that NUS looks the way it does, even when the majority can vote themselves out of this, is because of the herd mentality. Some big personality says, this is what must be done to survive, and the herd follows. Also, most people don't know how to change it. Most people don't know what the better alternative is, so they all follow the herd, while the wolves lead them. Even though the herd had freedom to knowledge, it doesn't mean they understood it. Neither that they have that freedom, nor how to use that knowledge, nor what it means. One of the biggest reasons people collect so much debt is because of something similar to inflation. The value of credits doesn't really drop, but the cost of living does rise. It's a high level of supply and demand. In NUS, food is high up on that list, but what is even higher is living spaces. So food is greatly affected by this semi-inflation, but having a place to live is much worse. And living outside puts a person at even greater risk because of raiders or thieves who would gladly make any sleeping and defenseless person into a commodity. And since most lower-level citizens tend to have a lot of children, the debt snowballs even faster. Trying to find a more sustainable lifestyle, parents tend to try and invest money into work, but often fail, where the high inflation further punishes them. The worth of a human life, if measured based on modern day, would be similar to $5 million American dollars. But in NUS, the economy is different, so the value of a single human life is different. In modern day, a single human generally has more potential. In NUS, a general human being tends to be much less useful. As such, a human life in NUS is worth much less. And because of that, they are more easily sold on the debt market. With a rough estimate, since it's a very different economy, if the value of one generalized member of NUS were to be translated to the modern-day economy, their worth could be close to 1 million. But even then, inflation is not included. Those 1 million won't do as much as they would in the modern day. Inflation in NUS would be close to 7 times what it is in modern day. But it is a difficult thing to say exactly, as economies change and adapt. Not because the economy is failing, the opposite. It's going so well that those who sell commodities can take those high prices, supply and demand, at its peak. But there are more factors that are involved. The worth of a human life can increase, but not in any comfortable way. If there are a lot of buyers on the debt market interested, that will increase the value. So even then, that $1 million worth can increase, especially when human lives are a sought-after commodity amongst the rich. So the worth of a human life could generally increase to 1.2 million, and when it's the right subject, it could rise even higher. But that is for no good reason. But then, in all honesty, the NUS economy is so different from anything modern that they can't truly be compared to each other. The numbers shared here are just an estimated comparison, so the NUS economy can make a little bit more sense. NUS has a whole other type of inflation, taxation, and economy in total. So it's not fully possible to directly compare their economy to the modern economy. The strongest units within an NUS force of any type would follow. First, the NUS enforcer, followed by the NUS soldier, the colonial militia, and often, at last, the privately owned militia for privately owned planets. But sometimes, people are rich enough to create a really powerful privately owned militia, but never stronger than the NUS military. But attacking any privately owned militia is still an act against NUS and would trigger a conflict with NUS itself. Military or enforcers would be sent, depending on the necessity, even though an enforcer is more powerful than a soldier. The military, in its totality, is more powerful than the enforcement offices in total. The military of NUS has bases set up in different locations, ready to recruit. As such, the NUS military can grow to extreme sizes when needed. And based on the reward, to be exempt from debt, anyone and everyone in the lower class will want to join. So recruitment of the military is beyond easy. It's more like a luxurious position to have when you are a lower class member, which often can result in people escalating into a comfortable place in society. Lower class members can often end up as middle class members with no issues in their lives. But this rarely happens, as NUS doesn't need many military members. In the NUS world, almost any technology is possible. If it isn't an invention that is standardized, it's something someone can invent for you. Professional inventors can create mostly anything you want. In this sense, NUS is incredibly versatile, and any home design is equally possible. The daily life of the richer members of NUS can basically have whatever they want. There is almost no limit in technology nor design. These are two common types of jobs within the higher echelons. The rich find ways to satisfy each other's needs. That's the usual job market of the richer members of society. Other roles are infrastructural, economical, or militarily/strategically based, though there is usually a standard level of everyday tools and commodities, such as computers, wrist holograms, and wall projectors. Things that even lower class members would basically need as a swell. Living math is an equation that enters a quantum state without any quantum collapse. As such, it creates a math that calculates every plausible equation. Could this be solved with this equation? Or with this, maybe? Living math makes all those at the same time. It is developed by making math that contradicts itself. As such, it expands further and deeper into the quantum probability realm. The difference between this and AI is that living math is still a clear equation. There is no black box, no self-regulation, just raw, direct numbers. When a solution is found, it's easy to see what the math actually did. Unlike an AI, which can be unpredictable and self-adapting, changing the process. Living math never changes the process. But it is important to note, living math in this sense is not just different equations next to each other. They are all interacting with each other. So it's not just one line, which is line A, and then line B, and so on. No. Each equation interacts with each other to create a bigger super equation, all contradicting each other, even producing different results. But still, they are all true to reality. They are all true in a probabilistic sense. Because in reality, nothing is certain, and that's the ultimate truth. You can write down the equation, and when you use it, the equation itself will account for the quantum probability realm. It can be strengthened with other quantum technology. A superposition could help, yes, but it would not be needed. But other things could be even more efficient. Let's say reality bending would be a quantum phenomenon. There is no need for superposition, because reality itself is a superposition. And living math would be able to map it out. Inside a computer, with superposition, it would be able to map out the quantum probabilities. Living math works the way math works, and you can implement it the same way you can implement any math. It's just much more useful and can calculate anything. It is also important to note that living math is not independent and cannot function fully without human interaction. This is another clear difference between living math and AI. Living math, in its purest sense, is a tool. Luinous and morphed aren't fully the same thing. Morphed are more like a mistake, and luinous is more of an intentional look. Luinous tries to look more animalistic, or at least like a deliberate fantasy animal. Morphed are more like an actual monstrosity, like a human mistake. Sometimes deliberate, but also sometimes an actual mistake. One can also say that morphs are either a scientific experiment or a mistake. And luinous is a mold, a desired look. If it's successful, if the mold fails, they become morphed. And the operation is not cheap. Some do go through the operation because they want to look like an animal. Others because they could potentially earn income from those who found such looks attractive, and sell their bodies for an hourly fee. Usually amongst the middle class, as the lower class could not afford it, and the higher classes could buy a slave and force the slave through the procedure. Any failure in the procedure or the mold to fully become luinous is considered a morph. You find luinous people amongst the higher and middle classes of NUS, since NUS has robots. Most jobs that would require enhanced physical capabilities, or other such capabilities, like sight, sound, and so on, would be done by a robot. Though they are primitive compared to AI and will need human assistance. So work in these fields is still inhabited by humans. But these humans are more focused on the robotics than the actual work.